Hey, folks. Zaide here with another episode of DramaQuest. I think this is going to be episode 19, and I'm excited to be back in the saddle doing kind of like history style DramaQuest podcast episodes again instead of the new stuff we've done for the last few. First and foremost, though, I need to give a big shout out to our new patrons. We just started a Patreon for DramaQuest and the YouTube and Twitch and everything that I've been doing creatively here. And my first three patrons came in, Big TBK, Params, and Aor69. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast and becoming patrons. If anyone else is interested, of course, you get a bunch of cool things, exclusive Discord access. You get the shout out here. You get early access to all the podcasts, a bunch of behind the scenes content and bonus episodes as well. And then you can have input on upcoming episodes. So if you're interested, check out a link that'll be in the description here. But big shout out to those three for showing the support and supporting the podcast. Today's episode is going to be on Project Quarm. We are joined by none other than Secrets, my dear friend, and the creator of Project Quarm. Secrets, throwing it to you.
Hey, Zaide. It's good to be on one of these for a change. I am Secrets of Project Quarm. I am the lead administrator. I do most of the design work, the development, the management, basically the founder of Project Quarm. How's it going, everyone?
Awesome. Secrets. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and carving out the time. I know you're super busy, especially now that you've got this massive behemoth 2,000 person concurrent user server under your belt as well.
It's been nuts. Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit, before we get into Project Quarm too much, can you tell us about your background within the MMO sphere?
Yeah, sure. I first started playing MMOs in 2001 with Velius right before Lucklin era Everquest. So I have the fondest memories of, the spires opening and the Karanas going up to Lucklin for the first time. And one of the most jarring transferences from the old UI to the Lucklin UI when it first launched. I actually started playing the game a week before they started cutting off to the new UI.
Oh, wow.
So I started playing this game. I was pretty accustomed to the old UI, and then suddenly this just gets dropped on me. So I have nostalgia the most for that era. In 2005, I started poking around at Everquest Emulator. I met Alia, our CSR lead, and we've kind of been friends off and on. There's been times when we've just, there is a group of friends that I started playing the game with. They've been my friends since, elementary school. I found out through a friend that their cousin was playing a game called Everquest. So I begged my mom, and I'm 32 now. You got to remember I was like 9 or 11 or something like that, years old, asking to play Everquest for the first time. I had my mother actually help set up my account and everything. It was quite wild. So I'm an old school EverQuest player in the sense that I've never actually truly played through Classic except as a new player.
Okay.
I played EverQuest 2, raided in there for a bit. That's when I first, when you start to get about 13, 14 years old, you're going to start playing EverQuest seriously. Like your brain's finally at that capacity to start understanding what raiding is and
Right.
try to participate in stuff. Sure, you might be the youngest runt in the group, but people probably won't listen to you. But you can still at least, kind of participate as a member. So I did that for a bit till about 2009. Once the Scott's Heartsman era of EverQuest 2 ended, kind of stopped playing. Played a couple different games in between, mainly Warhammer Online and a couple other different MMOs. So I've got a pretty diverse background of that. I'm also a current member of the games industry. I have been since 2015 working on various games such as APB Reloaded, Hawken, and Fallen Earth. That has been a fantastic experience that has complemented my hobbyist experience working on the emulator. So just wanted to mention that too.
That's awesome. And did you say, did I hear this right? 2005 is when you got involved in the emulator scene for EQ?
Correct. The Everquest emulator actually started in 2003. And because it started in 2003, there was so much early stuff that happened that led up to, Everquest emulator happening. There was, famously, Sony Online Entertainment actually had gone after the emulator folks early because they leaked the Planes of Power content early, like the zone geometry, the character models, so on and so forth. They were all leaked to the community, so they cease and desisted them. And that was the first, that was the start of emulators being, sort of like a nuisance to Sony Online Entertainment at the time. So we've always maintained a neutral, standpoint towards them. We haven't wanted to cause trouble. A lot of the early people were also uh, cheat developers, which cheat developers just quite didn't seem to always align with the emulator folks, because the emulator folks wanted to preserve the game, or they wanted to make their own version of the game, and some of them just thought it was cool and decided to do it. So yeah, early 2003 is when Everquest Emulator. 2 years later, I started poking around. I was like 12 or 13 at the time. I think
Right.
a lot of the folks that actually started the emulator were 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I know Rogan's only a few years older than me, for example, over at Project 1999.
Right. I remember near the tail end of my first leg of playing EQ, like I was getting ready to quit. One of my friends mentioned that there was this other kind of EQ you could play where you could walk around into any zone and see what all the other stuff was. It was like a server that some guy owned or whatever. And, this was like the kind of rumor mill stuff. And he's like, yeah, you could go play there and you could like see all these high end zones that you can't get to on your real characters. But it's bannable. If they find out you do it, you'll get banned. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. And, like it's funny in the beginning stages, these things are kind of like mythical with the players who don't even understand like, what emulating is back then. And it was such a underground piece of the community. But that is awesome that you were involved in that from such an early time. And you were briefly part of the staff on P99, right?
I was, yeah. That was more of a nuanced issue. Well, not issue really. I would say, uh, I initially was looking. I like the idea of classic preservation. From the time I started playing EverQuest, I knew that the game that I was playing was slowly being eroded. Lucklin changed a lot of the early zones. Planes of Power added some content that a lot of casual players just simply did not resonate with. And because they simply did not resonate with all that, they just quite literally had, they fall off. And by Gates of Discord, all the content in Gates of Discord was definitely not aimed at casual players. You had to originally play the video game that you were playing for a long time to even get into the Gates of Discord. You had to have all the AAs, had to have the Eldons done. There was a bunch of prerequisites that, especially with the character progression rates back then, were inaccessible for people like me who were casual players back then.
Right. Yeah.
And World of Warcraft offered a great alternative for them.
Yes.
So EverQuest saw a huge fall off on there. So when someone said you can go back and take your time and you can relive the time that you never got to experience, or the era that you actually wanted to experience, that appealed to me. So Everquest Classic was one of the first projects I can remember. There was a bunch of developers. A lot of us were amateurs at the time. Honestly,
Is that with Yalight and Harakiri?
yes, that was actually with them. They are
Yeah.
super talented people, and I was basically in the footsteps of giants. You'll hear more about that soon, because I have, and I think I speak for every engineer when I say this, massive imposter syndrome, just due to being behind everyone. I'm 13, 14, 15, looking at the Everquest emulator for the first time. I'm with a bunch of 20 somethings that are, kind of the same age that, Brad McQuaid and Bill Trost were when building the game for the first time. And then
Right.
they're trying to recreate the game or preserve it in some way. So I felt not only behind, but I just felt like out of my league. And that was a wild time for me. So um, I volunteered to get on the database staff at that point, which was, I was supposed to, look at inaccuracies of the game and try and get them to be accurate. I'm going to be honest, I did not know most of the game back then. There were so many nuances that players expected that simply I was out of my league for. So when I'm here playing, EverQuest, I only got to see a small portion of the game world especially back in like 2001, 2003. You still didn't have broadband internet readily accessible, especially to a child who didn't have the ability to pick. A lot of us were still on dial up or DSL or something that otherwise made looking up a wiki or an Alakazam page relatively inaccessible. I had a 150 page binder back then. So I didn't know much of EverQuest. And in fact, as time went on, I started to realize something a little bit more problematic was starting to happen. A lot of the old data that used to exist didn't exist anymore. If I went to
Right.
go look for it, if I went to look for classic Kazakhthul in 2007, 2008, that information didn't exist. There was packet collects that might have shown the locations of creatures, but a lot of the drop rates did not have proper sampling. Magello didn't even exist to about 2003, I believe. I'm probably going to get that date wrong, but there were a lot of drop chances for creatures that just simply weren't parsed. And in fact, due to Torvin of the Alcabra project, a lot of that was preserved for all time. And Torvin has made a reputation for himself of getting everything accurate over the years. Back then, we didn't have a Torvin. We had maybe a handful of packet collects from the era, limited reverse engineering talent, and a client that barely functioned unless you did things a very specific way.
Right.
So that was a challenging time for everyone involved. So EverQuest Classic was my first adventure.
I mean, I
Then,
feel like there's still mountains of little details that I don't know about EverQuest Classic, and I've been trying to play EQClassic. You know what I mean? For like the better part of the
yeah,
last 20 years. It's crazy how much detail and granularity there is there.
I didn't know for the longest time that resists of creatures had so much variance in the monster type and the zone type. Hell, on Project 1999, there used to be something called Chardock AoEing. Mechanically, this shouldn't have happened if they were actually emulating the era properly. The creatures actually have resisting creatures sprinkled in from place to place at higher resist rates for magic, meaning that actually pulling these creatures and then actually trying to AoE the zone was not feasible. On top of that, Emulator for the longest time didn't have a leash distance for any creature. You might be thinking on live, oh yeah, if I go far enough away from a creature, that's the new type of leash that they added. But in EverQuest, there's actually a leash that made the mob stop chasing you, but also made it not go back to its spawn. It's as if you had feigned death past a certain point. So if
Right.
you had gotten back in its, I think it was a default 1,000 point range, and you're a bard going halfway across the zone trying to pull to the zone into Chardock, those shouldn't actually pull to the zone, and they should stop at about the 1,000 unit point and go back as if you had feigned death.
Now
So
that's when they get 1,000 points, 1,000 units from the target, or 1,000 units from their spawn point.
1,000 units from their target, which
Right.
meant that if you were pulling to the zone in or got Call of the Hero, which wipes aggro, did it for the longest time as well on various emulators. Uh, if you were at the zone in, you shouldn't have kept aggro on any of those creatures. Once they got past a certain point, you shouldn't have actually, done anything like that. Also, your pet shouldn't be able to just go past creatures in Classic, which
Right.
meant that this tactic of pet pulling shouldn't have worked because it would aggro anything next to your pet. Now, there were certain nuances on the EverQuest for Macintosh server that the Alcabra project has decided to keep, such as making your pet pulling possible by making sure creatures that are, too far away can't be pet pulled, because by the time your pet gets there, it's dead anyway, and you've only got 4 or 5 creatures. Or the pet will keep, trying to attack. You'd have to keep backing off. You'd have to keep attacking. A
Right.
lot of that stuff just wasn't accurate for the era. And to be honest, without the work of the Alcabra project team, and Project 1999 has also contributed to the public repository, they're not very public about having done that. Nilbog, Tellin, Torvin, Elraz, and such all talk together rather infrequently, but to the point where we kind of have this preservation community that didn't exist. Going back to EQ Classic, we decided to, you know, make a server with limited information, with a lot of people that haven't done enough research, and with, honestly, I was lacking talent back then. Harakiri and Yelite were some of the only people that could have pulled that off, and are still, admittedly, some of the few people that are willing to pull that off.
I mean, yeah,
So
like kind of went off the deep end at the end, right? Without going into, I guess,
I
into too many
I wouldn't
details about
say
it.
I wouldn't say he went off the deep end, but he was frustrated with the lack of support. He was surrounded with people that weren't at his caliber at the time. And to be honest, Yelite was attempting to be a mentor for a lot of people. Every time he tried to do this, he would get effectively crapped on.
I remember
Uh,
his post saying that he was going to do, for the longest time, they were going to do like the real classic server. And they even got to the beta point where people were in there and it just looked so clean and perfect. And then he was like, yeah, I asked, I think it was SOE at the time, maybe it was Daybreak, for permission. And predictably, like everyone in the world could have predicted this. They said no, so I'm not going to do it. And we're like, what the fuck, dude? Like, obviously, they're going to, of course, they would say no. They can't say yes. What are you doing?
It
He's
was a
like, yes,
little
I'm
bit
going to,
more nuanced than that, actually. They
that was like,
received a
that
cease and
was his
desist
post.
order. I know that
Okay.
was his post, but there was also a cease and desist order that I still have a copy of it, actually, that was sent to EQClassic.org. And Yealite said, the only way I'm going to continue to do this after I got the cease and desist is I'm going to have to get permission from them to do this. If I don't get this, I'm going to make my own version of EverQuest without the intellectual property of the creatures in game. At that point, people got frustrated, understandably, and then the whole project kind of fell off. He transferred the project to Harakiri, who was more than capable, and they kept going in secret for about 5 or 6 years, and uh, over time they just kind of fell off. Interest fell off. Project 1999 obviously took off right after they had slowed their progress or went private, and because of that, they lost motivation big time. There's also problems with the trilogy client beyond that. There was stability issues. The client
Yeah.
was not working in a window well, even with the tweaks that Harakiri did, which were honestly some of the most incredible tweaks that I've ever seen. The game actually had 16:9 resolution support, widescreen support, even with the old classic UI, which I thought was fantastic. I have never been able to see that replicated to this day, and it just goes to show you the brilliance of someone like that who puts their heart into it. And I believe that any developer can replicate that with enough time.
Yeah.
But
Now, is EQ Classic pretty much 100% dead now? I see like the last post was December of 2020, so three full years ago. Is that pretty much done? Is Harakiri still working, or what's the deal? Do you know?
I actually don't know. Because of what went down, where I went off to Project 1999 instead of hanging around EQ Classic's Discord, they kind of disowned me, and admittedly, they were well justified in doing that.
Hmm.
So I don't know what they're doing. I kind of don't really uh, mind if they do or not. I've always tried to keep my contributions rather open, whereas they felt the need to keep everything privatized. And um, their last update, of course, was, as you know, 3 years ago. My opinion and what I would do if I was them is free themselves of the game client, let people get their assets. There's been, success with other emulation efforts of other games where if someone gets all the client assets themselves and then you were to provide a standalone way to interpret those that is 100% clean room emulation, you might be able to, say, emulate it on your own using your own protocol and not the protocol of whatever game you're trying to use. You might have heard of Lantern Project, which
Yep.
is
Yep. Lantern
uh,
EQ.
yeah, Lantern EQ is a continuation, I'd say, of EQ Classic. Harakiri had lent them their database. At this point, I think they're using TAC Project as the base. Harakiri
Hmm.
actually contributed a lot of the fixes early on to TAC Project because we use something so similar. There is a big benefit from using the Lua interpreter from TACP and keeping it binary compatible. So as TAC Project release changes, Harakiri and EQ Classic could just adapt them to their project. Eventually, though, they went to Lantern. Lantern's kind of an interesting project in the sense that it's not constrained by copyright. If you own the original copy of EverQuest, you are effectively licensed that by Sony. If what you do with that once it's licensed on your local computer is up to the end user, meaning that there is already settled law with this. Now,
Yeah.
does that mean that this is the best way to go? Probably not. But it's the only way that I would see something like a standalone client or even really emulating Trilogy. Kick and Leg, Whizzle, and a couple other people from EQ Classic or around EQ Classic have also participated in discussion in Project Quarm. And honestly, it's kind of interesting to see everything shift from closed doors to open contribution and sharing and giving community, which
Yeah.
just simply didn't exist a decade ago.
You
I
know,
could
it
have
just seems like there's no reason to keep it closed anymore. You see the open source projects that grow so much faster. Everyone's trying to do the same thing, and like Project Quarm wouldn't have been possible without open source Tech P, right?
That's correct. helped get TACP off the ground by repurposing and using the old EQ Emulator netcode from, I'd say, about 2003. I made that compatible. It's kind of weird. So as a software engineer, you can make something work if you kind of containerize it, and that's kind of what I did with the early netcode for the Alcabra project. I took something that would work for the client, and then I kind of encapsulated it with a modern network layer interface, and which got us most of the way there, actually. And then with the power of open source, anyone could have contributed to it. So this is going to be a little bit of a history lesson, but the Alcabra project was actually open source to start. The reason why the Alcabra project actually went closed source at all,
2002, baby, right?
Project 2002, yeah.
Yep.
And they were upset with how the rotations ended up. They wanted Project 1999 style dragon pulling.
So these guys were butthurt about the server rule about sharing content, right?
Correct. And
Okay.
this is going to get important later because
So they said, "Screw you! I'm going to make my own server where
and
I
it's
don't
open
have to
source,
share."
so they're within their right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And personally, I think that would have worked if it wasn't for the fact that people that had already contributed to the server felt like they were being ripped off or gypped in some way. I personally had no such feelings. I thought it was unfortunate that someone would be that upset, but I wasn't ready to, quit over this. However, a lot of our developers, such as Torvin, such as Haynar, and yeah, Haynar is actually a Project 1999 dev that came over to help and did a fantastic job with the netcode fixes early on. And so everyone wanted to quit at that point. There was another server that had the same rule set. The only difference is they had contested creature fights.
Yeah.
And their guild was one of the biggest guilds on the servers, which none of their guild actually interacted or meshed well with the EQ Mac players. I wasn't accepting that for an answer, but we'll get to that later with Project
What
Quarm.
guild was it?
It was called Arm and Hammered, led by Iance, I think they are. I mean, their whole guild was led by brand names.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I could see, it's open source, but then it sucks when someone takes it and they're weaponizing it. Like Project 2002 felt antagonistic towards the Alcabor project. Like the two servers, it was not amicable. You know what I mean? P02 wanted to like destroy TACP for lack of a better term. So I could see why they hit pause on the open source. And I remember they said like, hey, when we're done with POP, when the server is complete, we'll go back to open source. And then suddenly Project 2002 is like, actually, we can't do shit now because we don't have the talent, right? Is that kind of how it went?
Sort of. I mean, eventually they got bored of what they were doing and moved on. I think it's actually kind of interesting that a server like that was built on spite and malice. And I've talked about this actually in my stream a couple times. Anything that you put spite, malice, and power your entire life behind it is destined for failure. If you make a project just because you are upset at another project, you're going to effectively run out of steam once your anger or spite at the thing you're directed either dries up or succeeds in its goal. And then you're just left with something that, well, I don't want to run this now because, well, my goal of destroying something is over, so I don't need to care about these, 300 something players that are boxing on my server. Well,
Right.
it's more like 100 when you divide by 3 boxes, but and then they did, and then Project 2002 actually dropped it on a person called Trust, and I participated in a little bit of MU drama. You might know that. I'm notorious for having a little bit of a temper. I don't think anyone in their right mind that had to deal with a lot of what I have to deal with would be in their right mind. But I will say that the entire thing with Project 2002 was that they dumped it on a single layer developer, and I didn't like this developer because they're trying to rebrand, and I thought this was an attempt to change their name from Project 2002 to get away from the stigma. When actually the entire original staff of Project 2002 had actually quit this entire project because they were bored. They didn't have anyone. They've already had, quote unquote, won the problem. They had already gotten to the client of their choice. They had actually got into this state where they no longer had to, do anything. So they're like, I'm bored, I'm gone. Here, I'm going to give this to the player that's in one of the biggest guilds on our server. And they did, and that was Trust. So, and Trust is doing a great job running Wayfarer's Haven, which is what they renamed to, formerly Project 2002.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know that Wayfarers was formerly Project 2002. That's awesome.
And they have the same rule set as TACP, except they've gone beyond the the end expansion of Planes of Power. Now they're on Omens of War. They're trying to, be the TACP for Omens of War Everquest, which is actually kind of cool. I didn't
Yeah,
play
that's
Omens.
great.
I didn't like, uh, you know, I didn't like any of those expansions. I am very vocal about not liking Omens of War Plus, except for the Serpent Spine, but I'll get into that later.
TSS is great, but yeah, I think Omens is dog shit personally.
I think it is too. Walls of Slaughter was great, but that was about the extent of the greatness of that expansion.
Yeah.
The upgraded epics didn't resonate with anyone. There's a whole. We'll get that. I'll just save that for another day. It felt like after a certain point, though, EverQuest expansions just started to become less about the game content they were putting in and the thematic expansions they were releasing, but it felt like instead they were making features for marketing executives. If you were to look at, for Gates of Discord, for example, you would see a bunch of extra features they would add to the UI, or even Omens of War would be like, oh, we have this new file format that lets us add prettier stuff. That's cool. But then they started, changing the game's aesthetics, and on on some of the later zones, they just feel thematically nothing like EverQuest.
Right. I mean, you think back to like what Velius is probably like a huge portion of the player base is probably like one of the expansions they remember most fondly. And you're like, what is the feature of Velius? If you're like the exec, you're like, oh well, remember the dragons? There's like 2 dragons in Classic. There's like 5 dragons in Kunark. You're like, yeah, well, there's like fucking 50 of them in Velius. You're like, all right, sign it up, ship
Yeah.
it.
And
Yeah,
then
and now
Planes of
later on they have
Power
to have a bunch of bullshit for every expansion.
Planes with Power is like, so you remember how we made a prismatic dragon? Well, the prismatic dragon wasn't great enough, so we're gonna go kill the gods in their plane now.
Yeah.
Wouldn't we already do that? No, see, those were projections of the gods. These are the actual gods.
Right.
And
Normally
then
we do like 2 gods per expansion. How about 100 gods?
yeah. And then you start getting onto the later expansions. Eldon and LOI were feature expansions.
Yeah,
Admittedly,
100%.
even if you look at a Living Robots interviews on YouTube, you'll also see that a lot of developers got pulled off of there to work on EverQuest 2 that
Yeah.
were responsible for a lot of the early expansions. They heard about this new game by Blizzard Entertainment that was coming out, and they're like, oh, we got to put everyone on this new project so we match it. You heard about They weren't expecting to make 3 expansions at that point.
You
By the
know,
time,
Legacy of Yakesha, thematically, when you're going through, I love the zones. I hate the creatures in the zones because they started doing that thing where it's just like you just take a pile of NPCs and just trash is like appearing all through the hallways. You know what I mean? There's no like logical like it doesn't feel like things like live in the place. You know what I mean? It's just like 50 pirates in a row, 50 Luggolds in a
yeah.
row.
There was no reason to actually go to these zones. You didn't feel like you could ally with the pirates or the Lugolds. You
Right.
knew that there was a captain there in Hate's Fury. You didn't know why you were going into Dulac. These zones just felt like they were put together to
Right.
just give people things to kill.
Right.
I
Like you
didn't
go to
know what.
Crushbone and there's an orc trainer. He's on a hill and there's a bunch of centurions training with him. There's a slaver in the mines with a bunch of slaves. You know what I mean? Like things are
I
logical.
can't
It looks like
think
a
of
place
a
that's lived in.
notable. I can't think of a notable camp in Legacy of Akesha that I actually wanted to stay at. I felt like everything there was thematically dungeon crawls.
Yeah, no, I don't. Camps almost just go away in EQ. You know what I mean? It becomes like, oh yeah, you go to this zone and you do like the north half. Like, oh okay, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And there's 2 parts to that. Part of that is like the design got lazier and they did that just like throw shit in the hallway, and all the good items became raid drops, so there was nothing to camp.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I remember going into like Guck, and I can think of like a couple different item camps in Guck, but I can't really think of one thematic camp of maybe the Lugald Undead Tunnel, but even then, the Lugald Undead Tunnel just really didn't feel, like it was anything really.
Right.
1 second. I need 2 minutes. I need to actually just hydrate. I'm out of breath. Do you
Okay.
mind?
Yeah, no problem. All right, we're back.
All right. So yeah, Logold camps were the undead camps were something of a creature type appearing in the same area, but it just didn't feel like there was, any valuable items. I didn't think of any notable name that spawned there. And to be honest, I couldn't even distinguish that they were undead in that area, that they were zombies. Past that, the game kind of started losing its identity as the creature types actually got more detailed. I felt
Yeah.
like they should have kept the, style identity of the whole game. When you think of this game being, graphically more intense, I guess at the time, being counters thought features, graphic fidelity, and such were going to, sell the game more. And admittedly, that might have been the play based on analytics of their competitors at the time. Everquest 2 had, high stylistic, realistic fantasy, character models, and that might have been the play. They might have said, "Oh, you like our high fantasy stuff? Wait till you see this new high fantasy stuff," because that's how games were developed back then. We weren't hitting the Moore's law on creativity or processing power back then. Things were
Right.
expected to only continue to get better.
You know, it's weird though, was with like the Serpent Spine specifically, that expansion felt so good and so refreshing. It felt just almost like classic EQ all over again, but the graphics were better. It was like the one and only time I recall where they leveraged modern technology and everything, and they just did everything right. And it was an amazing expansion, like a love letter to classic EQ.
It was, and I also think that we should do a team make of the Serpent Spine areas probably sometime for Project Quarm. We'll get into that later,
Yeah,
though.
that'd be amazing.
I really like the idea of the Serpent Spine. It understood what classic EverQuest was, and I was almost expecting them to revamp every single character model to the style or fidelity that Draken were, and I'm
Hmm.
very shocked that never happened. The game could have been in a much better spot with that.
It would have been good, but the animations for the Draken
Oh, they were
have
not great.
yeah, they have so many frames that like if you like feign death on a Draken and then you stand up, he stands up like 10 seconds after you press stand. So in the
Yeah.
meantime, you're running around laying on the ground, slowly getting up, but your character still moves. Like it's just totally weird and
It's
crazy.
bonkers. Yeah. I would say that if the Draken, I am a big critic of the Draken character models just because I've never understood what they were trying to go for aesthetically. For Ixar, you had lizard people, you had Froglocks as, an existing race that became enlightened thanks to a god, and then you had Vashir, which were the cats that were blasted to the moon by Alcabar, and then the Draken were just kind of there the whole time. And being protected by the dragons and maybe descended from the dragons. I don't even want to think about how that happened.
They
Anyway,
should
let's
have
get.
well, you don't know the lore of how that happened?
Actually, I don't. I know something about heritage, Fish Dimitar, or whatever. Uh, no, I don't. I actually didn't play like the raid content and understood.
Uh-oh.
I
The
think it's been like
dragons took the
years.
form of elves.
Right. I remember something about that, and you had like a dragon visage form or something that you could
Yeah.
toggle. And
That used to be a big
anyways,
fantasy trope was that dragons would be walking around like the whole Bahamut walks around with like or maybe it's not Bahamut.
a
That
human
one dragon.
visage. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean
and
World of
seven
Warcraft did
birds or
that
whatever.
recently with the Drakthir race. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is a big fantasy trope of dragons walk among us and then show themselves. I mean, even Final Fantasy covered that with Shiva in
Yeah.
14. So
All right, so people are going to get mad at us secrets if we don't start talking about
oh,
Project Quarm
let's
soon.
let's get into it then.
This was becoming like the EQEMU podcast episode. But okay, so to rein us back in, talk to me. How did Quarm get started? I remember you and I were talking. I was playing on TAC P at the time, just happenstance, and you're like, yeah, they're going open source now, and like so all of a sudden, Project Quarm was like full steam ahead.
Oh, this is a fun one. I got bullied into it by a friend. My friend was like, "Hey, did you hear TACP is releasing soon? We should create a server together." It was Maze of Everquest Emulator. We've
Uh,
been joking on and off. I know. I know. I just heard that, and I was like,
right.
I love Maze to death.
Yeah.
We have done a couple servers together. However, I always end up with whatever we try and create, and I either shut it down or And this time, I decided to continue the kid. Like I kept it going after he lost interest, and I decided to, this is something I've wanted to do for since I started the Alcapra project. I knew I wasn't ever going to be able to do this alone. I needed a supporting cast of characters, and by this point in emulator history, I had that amount of people on my side. I had Torvin, I had Elraz, I had Alia, I had everyone going in my favor. So I decided, hey, if this is going to suck because I'm dropped with this again, at least let me make the best of this. So I said, let me do everything the way I want to do it. Every time I try and work on someone else's project, I lose creative vision. I have conflict with them. Not every time. Classless actually went pretty well. But Project Quarm felt like the right moment. There was a completed project. It was functional, and it didn't have many issues.
Some people need to be the person in charge or else they create dysfunction. I think you're like that. I know a few other people like that. I am like that. Like if I'm in a guild, I have to be the guild leader or else I'm a fucking problem.
Yeah, and even if you're the guild leader, sometimes you're just like, I don't know if I can handle this. The people I've put under me aren't the right people, and I don't feel comfortable getting rid of them, right? Like I've done that a
Right.
few times on projects, but I also don't want to destroy what I've created.
Right.
So sometimes you'll find ways to like pass the buck on to someone else.
Yeah.
But that being said, that's how Project Quarm got started, and I kept going with it. It just felt right, and then I started to stream the development on Twitch. I did the original goal with TACP of having it open source,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to do this. That's what I decided, and I did.
So I always thought, like, one thing that drives me crazy every time one of these emulated services is launching, I feel like they are like, hey, we're going to come out, and like it's somewhere between 4 and 8 weeks later is when the launch date is. I was thinking
Oh,
you should have been like, okay, I'm going to launch it in like January or March of next year. That's when I think you should have launched it. Obviously, I'm an idiot, and you did an amazing job. But I think it would have
there
been
is
insane
something.
to build that word of mouth for that long. You know what I mean? And have that much more
Yeah,
dev time.
I think so. However, however, I was overconfident. I also
Yeah.
know of this thing in industry where we have a 30 to 60 day hype cycle. I'm starting to get, like 60 to 90 people watching me on Twitch just sit there and engineer stuff at a time. And they were kind of resonating and vibing with what I was doing, which was just coding on stream, really.
Right.
And by this point, I'm like, huh, maybe I should move this up a little bit. I'm doing something that's really awesome. I'm kind of putting my heart into this. Would people actually care if I did this sooner? And actually, I'm going to just admit this on this podcast. The reason I went for the October 1st launch date is because you suggested it. There was no other reason.
Did I suggest October
You did
1st?
because
Yeah.
it would align with your schedule or something like that.
I
And I was like,
remember because Quorum launched like I was doing this big thing at work that was taking up like 12 to 16 hours a day every day, and Quorum launched legitimately like 2 days after it ended. So so it was
oh wow,
perfect. Yeah.
yeah,
And also
I
like my
literally
wife
did
was out
that.
of town.
Oh, that's the perfect time. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know you said something about that. And I was like, I got to do this not for myself because I'm gonna burn myself out either way. I'm gonna try and launch it early or something. I'm gonna give myself a deadline, and I started on it in August and launched October 1st.
Yeah.
That's a
But
2 month hype
you were
cycle.
looking at like that October month anyway, or so I didn't like make you launch it. I didn't encourage you to launch it like months early, right? You were already in that range. I was just that final date, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
like, that works perfect.
People are going to send me death threats if I didn't put that
Oh
caveat
my
in there.
god, no, I'm gonna get death threats no matter what pick,
Yes. Speaking of
whatever.
death threats, I want to say that I don't have any beef with Maze. I think Maze is like the chaotic evil version of you, who are yourself chaotic neutral.
Yeah, I quite literally think that some people just are very passionate about the games they play, and it
Yeah.
manifests in different ways.
Oh yeah.
So I'm just going to say this for the record. I am a chaotic force of nature. I know that when I'm trying to do things, things get chaotic. I will make decisions on a whim, and a lot of that happened with Project Quorum too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
uh, did you want to get into a little bit of that? I think
Oh yeah.
you have
Definitely.
seen all of that.
I want to talk about all the nitty gritty details that we can fit in the time. But one of the things that I remember we were talking about before it came out was like you started to realize it was going to be a pretty big launch, and I remember being like, "Man, Discord's getting pretty big. A lot of people are talking about it. What do you think?" And you're like, "I think we might have like 700 people on launch." Do you remember
Yeah,
that?
I do remember that, and I do remember when I had mentioned that we had about 1,800 in the Discord. Obviously, right now we got a little bit more than that in there now.
What do
I
you have, like
actually
10,000 or something?
let me look because I have not looked in a period of time that I remember. Does it 16,000 in the Discord, if you
Yeah,
can believe that.
insane.
Like, we started to get to like 4,000 prior to launch. I was like, oh no, do I even have the infrastructure for this? I didn't even know if this would hold up or anything. We're still getting new players to this day, just joining the Discord and hanging around.
I mean, one of the things that I looked at, I was like, okay, P99 Discord has like 12,000 people in it, and they have like 1,500 online between all their servers. So I was kind of projecting off that, and I was like, we'll see how it goes. I'm sure a lot of people are just checking in, but then like,
Generally, I can kind of estimate concurrent user counts just based on my industry experience,
yeah,
based on how many are in there and how the buzz around the game is going. I was expecting 700 because I had 1,800 in the Discord at the time.
yeah.
Obviously, that started to grow, and I'm like, we could have had close to 2,600 on launch if the servers had stayed stable. They did not.
Right, a lot of stability issues, but I mean, everyone in the world has. I guess not everyone. Anyone who's done a lot of launches of anything, like dark paw servers, not to throw stones, but like official servers for any real MMO on launch day suck.
They've
So
gotten better at that. Surprisingly, I've watched Darkfall actually iterate from TLP to TLP.
they
Oh,
are definitely improving for sure, and it helps when they have two servers launched simultaneously too.
absolutely. Like
But
Thornblade and Mischief at the same time was perfect.
perfect. Yeah,
I
it was
love that.
smooth, buttery smooth. But you had 2,000 plus people concurrent day one,
In
and
Classic.
yeah, people have to understand too that concurrent users, that's like all at the same time, but you probably have like 20,000 unique or maybe 15,000 unique people who are trying the game, logging in throughout the day, right? It's like
Yeah.
crazy numbers.
It was also complicated by even after we fixed the crash issue, which, as far as I remember, was an issue in the netcode related to thread locking. After that was resolved, the supplemental fix that I had done actually didn't work to fix the issue entirely. It only delayed a crash that would get worse and worse as time went on.
Mm,
And this is how the power of open source really helps things. There's a contributor called I think it was Blaine, who actually submitted a entire fix for the netcode issue. They rewrote it, they got it together, and then they just it kind of worked. I right after that I was just like, oh, that fixed it. So it just goes to show you if someone's that dedicated and they're interested in doing something, they will fix it. This person was really upset because they wanted to play the game, and because the game was open source, they learned the entire code base. They had a Docker instance. They were able to, go in there. They knew how STL worked. They know how um, the entire netcode fundamentally looked on a high level. They, I described the issue to this person, and then they made a patch to fix it. They made two or three of them, and I said, "Here's my concerns." They said, "Oh, I'll make sure I keep something in there." And about 2 or 3 weeks later, the issue was resolved. Not even by myself. I
wow.
got it stable, but I had to still restart the server every 3 days. It was stressful for a while. That's why on launch we were starting to see some player drop off. We kept the servers online, but we had to keep restarting.
Yeah. But I mean, then it kept growing. Once it stabilized again, it kept growing for a few weeks and got bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, it was just
It
crazy
capped
at one
out at
point.
2,147 players. Yeah.
Yeah, everything was camped all the time. And I remember, God, I think Faceless was like the only guild that was truly pre-formed and like ready to go. You know what I mean? Like had a little bit of a plan.
Yeah. I don't think
Because
Intervention or Mayhem had a plan on launch, if I remember.
no, I think Intervention was a pretty natural formation. Like people found each other that were like kingdom dudes, and they were like, oh,
A
like
lot
we
of
should make a guild.
P99 players. Yeah.
Yeah, and Mayhem, same thing. They're just a P99 guild, but they were led by kind of a dingus. So, not to be confused with the player dingus, who I think is fine. But anyway, so basically, what happens is you put thousands of people in a classic EverQuest sandbox, and there's going to be problems because there's a content bottleneck, right? Like, there's no
Yeah.
way around it. Like every rat and beetle is contested, and at first, no one has a guild tag above their head. But Faceless was the only guild that formed like actually got formed on day
had
one.
all the eyeballs on you at that point because no one else had made a guild.
Right.
And as a
And
guild leader, and unfortunately our CSR team wasn't really equipped to deal with that big of a guild.
yeah.
Alia and I had talked about this early. There was no way to effectively police a guild of that size. And Alia was like, "What? Why not? They're the guild leader. They can kick these people." And I'm like, "It's not that simple. When you have 200 people, I think what was your guild? Like 500 to 600 players by
It
the
was
end
like,
of
yeah,
it."
yeah. We just said anyone who wants to join can join, and in a week we're gonna kick the people who, you know what I mean, just aren't making it. Because you don't know who's going to be who in the beginning, right? You have your
Yeah,
core people that you know are good because you played with them before. But it's like, hey, if you want to come play with us, it's kind of like a 1 week tryout kind of system. But like day one, maybe like 28 hours into the server launch, Alia was hitting me up like Intel's like, hey, um, you guys are violating, you're hitting rule 11, you're violating these rules, and you're risking your guild getting disbanded. And I'm like, streaming, there's like, I think at the time I had like 300 people watching me argue with Alia and Tells, and I'm like, Alia, what are you talking about? Like, what could possibly be happening right now? I'm like level 27, and
yeah.
I found out it was Abacab
Of
on
course, of course, it was
of course it was
Africa.
Abacab, right? Is Abacab was in Kanos Hills killing all the shit that low levels were trying to kill because he was trying to spawn Pigeon. And I'm like, dude, I have no control over that. I'm not anywhere near that.
I am
Like,
not Abacab. I'm not going to vouch for Abacab. In fact, I'll kick Abacab before I even start dealing with this issue because it's Abacab.
right, I
But I
was like,
think
hey,
even then, you're like gave him a chance, right, to correct his behavior, even though it's Abacab.
yeah, I was like, it sounds like it's just, you know what I mean? Like he's trying to do something. It's an open world kind of mob, an overworld mob. These are notoriously shitty camps. And isn't it like the first person to tag it? I don't know. If he's breaking the rules, I think that you should suspend the player who's breaking the rules.
Absolutely,
And
yeah.
I
That's what I
shouldn't,
pushed back with a little bit internally too at the
right.
time.
I'm like,
I
hey, I
I was
shouldn't be involved at all.
I'm like, there's no, and Elia's like, well, we need to start letting officers take accountability with these people. I'm like, there's no way that these officers could ever tell someone to stop being shitty. If they keep being shitty, you're gonna, it's kind of interesting how that kind of evolved too as the server went on. We kept putting more guilds in the Rule 11 channel. We'll get into Rule 11 a little bit later, especially with some of the things we did to mitigate player drama. But we did have to make some adjustments. Obviously, actually, as a result of Abacab griefing, that's what started the trend of making things legacy items that shouldn't
Right.
be.
Yeah. So your solution was to just delete the thing that was causing the problem, which it was a permanent solution to an issue. Like even if Abacab got suspended that day by Alia, or if I kicked Abacab first, if I kick him, Abacab is still there doing the same shit, right? Doesn't
And
change
there's going to
anything.
be new Abacabs too. It
Right.
doesn't solve the problem that the camp is the issue, not the actual player. The player
Exactly.
behavior interrupts the gameplay because the gameplay requires you to interrupt everyone else's gameplay.
Right.
So
It's a
if you
game
were
design
to,
thing, and you
yeah.
fixed it.
Interestingly enough, we didn't see much pushback to that. Someone saw, yeah, that makes sense because this is a very hard camp to do. So you make adjustments to this camp and make it so you can't farm it and stay there 24/7. Then slowly people will go out of there as people get their items.
Right.
And then I was like, how many other camps can we, apply this to? Haddon was one.
Yep.
Fishbone Earring, we changed to 15-minute respawn time because there was a bunch of people waiting on Haddon. And our CSR team came to me and said, there's someone that said someone got their Haddon kill stole, I believe. And I remember back on T99 this being an issue. Someone said, oh, I was here first. I was here when the server got up. And then these two people are there when the server got up. We have no way of verifying which one logged in first and was at the camp first. And reasonably, we can assume that we will never know.
Right. And it's also kind of like a shitty way to determine the camp when it's a server coming up and you both log in at the same time. Like just whoever's internet connection was faster gets the camp. And it could be like hours and hours and
That
hours
still
long.
happens with some camps too, but not ones that are 6-hour respawn camps.
Right.
Those hurt. If you're sitting there for 6 hours and then someone decides, no, I was here first. It's like the person going up to the urinal and saying, hey, what's up? I wanna go hang with you in your camp, and then the thing spawns, the kill steal you. You have to go through a lengthy process to get the item reimbursed. That's
Right.
not fun for anyone. Now, give people the option and avenue to start sharing it. such as a 15-minute respawn, and the natural thing we'll do is create lists. I didn't even have to. P99 had a list system. Do you know about that at all?
Oh yeah. The list system gave me cancer, dude. I mean, it is so nerve wracking being like, did I miss my list check? You know what I mean?
Oh
Like
no,
you sit there for like 40 hours and you're like, oh God, I hope I don't like get too tired. And like, I'm still at
I
the
hope I
keyboard.
don't
I'm
die
awake.
playing a video game. And at
Right.
that point, it's not a video game; it's a career, it's a
Right.
job you're doing.
Like,
I
dude, I
make
don't want to spend 3 days camping a mana stone where I can't go to sleep.
Yeah, and or you have to have someone log on your account, which is a security risk for the account. We
Mm-hmm.
banned account sharing in the simplest ways, which is not actually enforcing it. But if someone does something on your account that's stupid, then everyone that's touched the account gets hit with that. That was controversial early on because a lot of guilds end up, sharing their guild bank or something. An officer might have to log it on or something. And to an extent, I think we still don't have a solution for that, at least that use case. I think there's ways to make like a proper guild bank even in this old client. We made instances in this old client. We'll
Yeah.
get into that shortly, but yeah, I
Well,
think
I
that
could tell you, I know we'll touch on this whole story later, but after like one pretty concerning incident, Faceless had a policy of like, yeah, fuck sharing a guild bank.
yeah, because think about it. We have this policy in basically every industry company I've worked for as well. If a person's sharing their account and someone says a racial slur or something on their account, we have to ban the account no matter who was on it. Like
Right.
that
You
doesn't
you
matter.
action the account, not the human.
Now, let's say that the person says, "Well, I didn't share my account. Someone hacked my account." Then we unban them, and we give them their account back, and we say, "Please add two-factor if this happens again. If it doesn't seem to be because of a compromise, we will ban your account. Please, your account security is your responsibility." And there's been often times where someone intentionally shares their account. They say that their password even in chat to someone else, and then someone logs in their account. Now these two characters are inexplicably intertwined because there's no way to really distinguish besides connect where they're connecting from as to who was on the account at the time. They're basically the same. They're the same account, the same character, not the same person.
Right.
We might go through whatever person it was and look through them, and as you said, there's a story in how having Faceless that we'll get into soon.
Yeah.
That one was kind of interesting.
Now, you also increased the respawn times. First, it was just for newbie zones, right?
Yeah, I already saw what happened on green, on P99 green.
Right.
There was a big congestion issue on launch. People were standing on top of mob spawns, which shouldn't be possible, by the way. The TACP actually had a random respawn location system that wasn't enabled even on our server in some zones.
Yeah, for
That
field
allows it
mobs.
for field mobs
Yeah.
because it on for example Quillmain, right? There are supposed to be random spawns on P99 for the longest time, and I think still is the case. Quillmain
There's like three
spawns will
or
spawn.
four.
There's like 3 or 4 spots they can spawn out of,
Yeah.
but they always spawn out of the same spot. That's
Right.
not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to get a random spawn somewhere in the world, and then Quillmain will pop out of that just randomly.
Right.
There's like 56 different locations, and it picks one at random. EQEMulator didn't have that for the longest time, and TACP finally does. And I think it's easy and phenomenal how they just set that up. But without that spawn, that system, we need to increase the spawn rate of everything. Even with that in place, you're still going to have people kill stealing each other. If
Yeah.
there's 120 people like there were in Greater Fadark early on, there's going to be trauma. There's going to be chaos. There's going to be people fighting over everything. So in the beta process, I actually tested and asked people, does this seem fine? What is the kind of values? And we kind of decided any spawn that was 60 seconds or less would go down to 12. And then we decided any spawn that was about 6 minutes or less would go down to 60 seconds. This means that you would see a Fippy Dark Ball every 60 seconds. You would see a Null Pup every 10 or 12 seconds.
Yeah.
That helped congestion early on, and people really resonated with that. Eventually, we expanded it to dungeons. After the initial launch, I expected to turn this system off entirely and just, that was it. My hands are clean. Y'all can do whatever you want now. Except that wasn't the case. Instead, everyone had, it was unfortunate because there were some cases in like Guck where people are, doing the same thing I anticipated them doing in smaller zones. So I'm like, I'm resistant for the longest time to this. One second. Um, I'm resistant to doing this in dungeons because I do not actually want to do that. Like, one second. I just didn't want any of this to happen. Like,
Right.
I did. If I enable a respawn time, that's going to be a problem. Just give me 1 second.
Well, one of the things was that it made it a lot when you eventually did it in the dungeons. Um, one of the downsides that people see for sure is like the economy is impacted because rare loot becomes a lot more common. But the thing that changes a lot for the player experience is the content becomes a fucking lot harder. I mean, holding down a Freedy or Frenzy with like 3 or 5 minute respawns gets pretty dang spicy, especially when you're like naked and you have like 3 defense.
Yeah, I think the reason why we kept the defense stuff kind of how it was though is because we want people to actually commit to their characters, and because of that, they a lot of people just chose not to effectively.
Yeah.
They would just get to 10 or 11 and they'd stop trying to level their defense skill. In classic EverQuest, if you power leveled and you were just kind of half AFK or just going up to something tagged with a damage shield, you can get to 40, 50 really quickly. However, your skills are going to suck, your defense skill. I remember someone had PM'd me and said, I have fond memories of growing up and having to go to Ancient Cyclops camp and then pull a bunch of Sea Furies to the island to the side of it, and then just have me be healed the entire time. That's not great.
Right, yeah, to get your defense up. I mean, my
But
my
that's
character
because you were
defense was
power
like
leveled.
3.
Yeah, you had to be power leveled, or if you were power leveled, or you just never spent time in combat, that would happen.
Yeah, so for me, like I played a necromancer and I quested the first few levels. I did like the quint quest, and what that did was to get a defense skill up, a mob has to miss you. Because I was already like well under what my defense should have been by the time I started getting in combat, mobs never missed me. And th- by the time I was like level 40, not only would they not miss me, but they would always max hit me. It was crazy. It was like when I'm standing up, I may as well be sitting down for the amount of damage I take. It was
Yeah, yeah,
really a lot harder. But I appreciate that, and I think like it's good. It's what EQ is supposed to be.
yeah. I
Um,
would.
I think the first big thing that happened that caused like comments of favoritism with Faceless, though, it was either the dungeon change or it was the GM event with Khazak-Thul and Highkeep. I think it was the Khazak-Thul Highkeep thing, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So Arson gets the server first level 50, and he is in Project Faceless. So Alia throws an impromptu GM event in celebration of the server's first 50, and Khazak-Thul attacks Highkeep. And everyone comes out there, and Khazak-Thul was like must have been like Velia's Khazak-Thul, right? Because he had a ton of health.
yeah. And that whole incident, I was actually in bed when all that happened.
Yeah.
I was just kind of stressed out over the server launch, and I had, just look at it, and I saw I heard a complaint from someone. I don't think it was you. I think it was someone else that said, "This is the funniest thing, right?" It was someone said Kasich Thul is saying the word "fuck" in out of character. Sorry, I think that you can censor that in post production. And
Nah,
I
we're good. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
um, and I was like, "Oh shit! All right, what is Alia doing?" We were trying to keep to the lore for this thing, and yeah, there was. I said to Alia, "Do a GM event, see if people resonate with that." And Alia's like, "Okay, so what should be the reward for this thing?" And yeah, there were the reward for this thing was um
AON.
AON.
Yeah.
Yeah,
4 AONs.
was
Now,
unfortunate.
I don't even think that's a problem. Even now, I don't think it's a problem to give out. It's just an illusion item. It's not super overpowered or anything. I mean, people are like, "Oh, that's like a clicky buff, instant clicky dispel kind of thing." I guess like it's just really minor. The biggest impact would probably be like the economic impact of being able to sell it. But the thing that happened was the criteria for getting the AON was the person who got the killing blow on Kazakh Thul, which was Kegnin and Faceless. The person who was the first level 50 triggering the GM event, who was Arson and Faceless. Then we did a random roll, which was
which
won
was
by
very spammed, by the way.
and that was won by someone in Faceless. But of course, because we bat phoned it and we got a whole raid there, we formed a raid. We also got the EXP for all the mobs in the GM event because everyone else was just fucking around. We had like a raid killing them, and we got like a level off of that. And so the random roll just went to someone in Faceless, and then we had a GDKP plat bid, which came down to basically all of Faceless versus Poov, who was a level 49 bard who had been like mass kiting specs and had thousands of platinum. He won, and then he joined Faceless. So Faceless walked away with 4 AONs, and people lost their minds. But I mean, like, I learned
you learned you earned them all legitimately back then. I remember too, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, and it was like whatever, you know what I mean?
You're also the biggest guild on the server. Statistically, you're going to end up with the most AONs out of everyone, but the optics were there, obviously. So it doesn't matter what you do, the optics will always, be shit.
Yeah, and EQ players, especially emulated players from like P99, are super. They have been trained to, like, if I cry, I will get my way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if they
and I remember they
about
were like
anything enough, they're going to,
And that's what kind of turned me on the community there. Not just that, but like that mindset. People were like so quick to petition everything, and they were just like very whiny as a player base in the beginning. I don't think they're like that anymore for the most part. Instances have got them fat and happy, but I was just like, I can't take these people seriously anymore because of like how much QQ is happening here over like nonsense and nothing. So that was the first time that there was an accusation of favoritism. Then you increase the dungeon respawn or decrease the dungeon respawn timers because people were asking. They're like, hey, Upper Guck is too busy. There's like 200 people in here. Unrest has like 200 people in here. So you do it for dungeons. Now, what those people didn't realize was like, yeah, now there's more mobs in Upper Guck, but the only people in the game who were in Lower Guck and Solasec B and Kedge were Faceless. And we could sit at Frenzy, Ghoul Lord, Archmagus, all those camps and get a named mob like every 2 minutes. It was insane. And after a few days, people realized that, and they're like, whoa, more favoritism towards Faceless. We're like, come on, man. It's like the same rule that everyone else has.
No matter what you do there.
Yeah. So I felt bad for you because you were getting crucified by people 24/7 for something like you're just trying to help the server. And I was like, listen, no matter what Secrets does, it's going to benefit Faceless more because we're the most organized. We're the largest guild right now, and we are the highest levels. We're going to take advantage of any opportunity more effectively than anyone else is going to do it. And that's not Secret's fault. But they sure did blame you.
They sure did blame me. And honestly, I thought it was a freaking tragedy that they blamed me for all of that. But at the same time, people are going to go with the most popular opinion they have at the time, just simply because, they see one person say something that's a vocal minority. Most people who are content with the game they're playing will never say anything. I've seen this in industry. I've seen this even in Everquest. There's a certain critical mass of users that would actually vocalize something. And as time went on, I was realizing I'm talking to a bunch of people in my Discord that just simply do not play the game. They might play the game, but they only appear in Discord during certain hours, which means that they spend a chunk of their life either interacting with the game or vocalizing a complaint for the entire time they're in Discord vocalizing it.
Yeah, and there's
the people that were
trolling you, really.
Yeah, if there's people that were actually having a complaint, they would be like a valid complaint. They'll say it once, they'll hope we see it, and then they'll never say it again. They might bring up like I think the most what is the word innocent or wholesome reports are the ones that come in the bug reports channel or the feedback section
where someone says usually, well, or they're dumb, but they're never malicious.
They're never malicious in the sense that I can click on this, I can see one where someone's literally discussing should Shield of Immaculate work a certain way. Whereas if I go into the guild's chat, or if I go into the complaining chat, or if I go to the feedback chat, we got rid of a lot of the the old channels, so I can't really look at the history. But
Right.
we would see suggestions that were disguised as veiled threats to do something, not mere suggestions to do something, or feedback that something should be a certain way.
Yeah.
So as time went on, I started to actually just kind of ignore the feedback and just go with my gut instinct, unless it was something that I wasn't aware of already. And I'm aware of a lot of things that happen in the game. We do have no analytic systems that would be in the traditional sense, but we do have analytical systems that work in the what would I say this? The overall overarching sense, meaning that because I'm actually participating in a lot of this discussion, I'm also putting myself out there as a target. If I respond to a bug report that is a legitimate bug report, I'm never going to hear back until that person either is like, "Oh wow, I saw that in the patch notes, that's fixed." But if it's something that someone's passionate about and they want to see happen, they will be relentless until that thing happens. And when that thing finally happens, they'll be like, "Ah, I'm so glad you finally listened to my feedback. I will never talk to you again." Even
Right.
though they've spent every day daily talking to me about the same issue repeatedly. And again, as time went on, I just stopped listening to them. There was no point in it. It just got more and more unproductive to listen
And it will
to a
drive you
vocal
crazy.
minority. Yeah. If I talk to someone that's violated the rules in the same way, or if I think someone's violated the rules, I like to use people as examples sometimes, but I also don't like to antagonize people. Every time I've ever antagonized someone publicly, even as a server staff, they think, well, you're the server staff. You can't talk to me that way. I can only talk that way to you. And they will pull the double standard card of you're the server admin. You have to fall in line. You have to, do as I say because I'm the player and I won't play here. And I'm like,
You're like, nah, bitch, it's my dojo. Get out.
yeah, pretty much. I started to, be a little bit more aggressive towards people that would, threaten to quit, and I expected to see fall off because people don't like being told that they're wrong and they should go play somewhere else if they don't like the way I'm developing the server. So over time, I started to see a lot of fall off due to that because people just weren't accepting what I did. And I pushed the envelope a little bit and I started to, mid-November, I started to get burned out because I'm just going back and forth with people that I just simply disagree with.
For the
And I
record, I don't think that you got fall off for that. Like, first, look for people who are listening to the episode right now. The server status on EQEmulator, Project Quarm is the most popular server.
single box, yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's the most popular server regardless. No server has higher numbers at this moment as we record than Project Quarm, and you're like 400 higher than the next closest, which is
And yet
P99
I
Gaming.
still complain about this to myself because I hold myself to a higher standard.
Yeah,
Even if the players don't hold me to that same standard, I still stick by my guns for a lot of what I do, just
yeah.
simply because I want my ideas to work.
No,
I want to either die on the hill of having something succeed or fail on its own merit. If it doesn't work, we identify what doesn't work and we try and identify fixes for it. For a while
yeah.
there, we were going to do a loot revamp system, and I'm going to start going into kind of the instancing stuff that we were doing. Um, we were going to do a revamp on how loot worked that we never went through with because people were very vocal against it. It would have changed a lot of group loot to loot lockouts. You would have to wait an hour before looting your next frenzy, so it would require people to hold multiple camps. Obviously, that was not really welcomed, and people started to get concerned that this is, quote unquote, not classic. And understandably, I had only done that in response to people not liking rotations, but it was the first thing that came to my mind. And actually, Alia and one of our CSR members had actually come up with that together. So we are quite proud of this system. So when we put it publicly, Alia warned me twice saying, Secrets, you better not talk about this publicly till it's done. Put it on the players day one, and they'll have to either adjust to it or they will just have to quit. And I said to Elliot, these people are not going to like this. You know that. I need a. I don't even know if I would like this. If I was playing this, I don't know if I would like this. And eventually I just said to Elliot, I don't like this. I don't want this system. And I decided to scrap the idea, partially. And then we started to look at different ways to address the raid rotation issue. We were going to do automated raid rotations, which was going to be everyone gets a chance at their mob every so often. They have to be on at certain intervals or they lose their spot. And that just, for a game that has its ideology around not wasting people's time, forcing them to log in when they don't want to log in is antithetical to the entire creative design of the server.
Right.
And I just decided, what fits in this box? Instancing. Okay, what are the downsides of instancing? We've made everyone form guilds already. So we need to have whatever instancing system we have tied to this concept that a guild would be the only thing raiding. And then we, made the raid tryout system so people could get on the raid rotation. I was like, okay, so we already have this tryout system that has a form of pseudo instancing. What would it take to get this working with an automated raid rotation system? And then I started looking at the problems that we would have with that. If someone doesn't kill a creature for 3 days and it holds up the entire rotation, or even 24 hours, as is the case with Nagafin, that's going to cause problems long term. And then I said, okay, so what's the problem with instancing? The loot is too accessible. This is the number one complaint I got by people. And I started to analyze that. I was like, okay, how do I fix this? Do I change the drop chance? Do I, make the lockout timers for these instances more infrequent? What happens if someone gets kicked out of their instance and they can't get back in? Do I keep them in the instance? Do I kick them out of the instance? Are they allowed to sit there and loot their thing? What happens if someone brings into an instance from outside their guild? And none of these solutions really seem to work or resonate with players, and especially with my design. So instead, what I decided to opt to do was this interesting idea of, let's add loot lockouts. We were going to do this for our personal loot system and our private loot system. A lot of the items that are in later expansions, and late Velius and Luckland and Plains of Power especially, are not tradable. There are a lot of Plains of Power items that simply will not leave characters that are not present for the kill. You have to be there to loot some of the SSRA items. You have to be there to loot the VT items. So at some point, this issue kind of resolves itself long term.
Yeah.
And a lot of players push back saying, well, what about if we get 20 Cloak of Flames? I'm like, that's going to be your alts gear in a couple expansions. No one cares about the Cloak of Flames past Classic. You might be able to get the Sky Belt once Sky comes out, and now people have Sky Belts, which are better than a Cloak of Flames for haste. And there are also just later expansions that have better haste items. So at a certain point, this just doesn't become an issue, especially once no drop great gear start getting dropped. Vex Thou, as you might know, bleeds gear everywhere.
Yeah. It's just a pinata of gear.
It's a pinata, if the TXVs or whatever they're called at the end that you can pull to the zone.
Yeah. DXXT.
Yeah. They have a bunch of, haste rings that you could just have your rogues loot en masse. And at that point, why even bother? Like, that doesn't make sense to me to keep all these restrictions in. So what I ended up doing is putting the loot lockout system in. And we were going to say, oh, but you have to stay in your own guild's instance. No two guilds can raid together. So we started to try that for a bit just to see how that went, because we don't want to, make reactive feedback to how people are actually participating. And a guild alliance pushed back and said, well, we have 3 instances. Do you care that we're exploiting this? And then another person piped up and said, my guild is Dial-a-port. We want to actually sell our instance because we are never raiding with a bunch of druids and wizards. Can we sell this out to someone? I said, are you doing RMT with it? And they said, no. Then I said, well, that puts us in a weird predicament, because technically you're supposed to raid with 18 members, 12 guild members, and 1 officer. And if you do that, if you have people come in outside of your guild and you have people raiding from your guild, there would be no problems. But eventually I just realized the whole concept of loot denialism, and you'll hear me talk about this word a lot, is just inherently based on the fact that multiple people could not raid the same creature on P99 or back in the day on Live. And people expected this only because it was present on P99. Right. They actually would overall benefit from having this restriction removed, because the market will adjust. People are like, oh, but the market's going to be flooded with Cloak of Flames. And I'm like, I don't think so. Mischief wasn't flooded. If you look at the Mischief TLP live server, the entire server did not get flooded with Cloak of Flames. It got flooded with a lot of loot.
For what it's
But
worth, though, Mischief had 3 months in an expansion, not 9. But I get what you're saying, and I think loot denial is like a toxic mindset that we have.
yeah, I also think that Mischief ended up being one of the most popular servers for
Mm-hmm.
Darkball games. That was
Best one ever.
fantastic. Yeah,
Best one ever.
it had the best numbers. So the concept of loot denialism being correlated to increased popularity or increased enjoyment is just not true.
No, there's just a very loud subset of the EQ player base that has a hard on for being able to deny other people content. That's all it
Yeah,
is. And those people are always in the top guild, which means you always have the most interaction with them. So it looks like it's something that people really want. But every time we have seen push come to shove, the more popular server is the server that has more raid accessibility. Every time. Look at
yeah,
Finny. Finny blew the doors off of every other TLP that ever came out. The only difference was TrueBox and instances. So we know two things create popularity historically in EQ servers: lack of boxing and available raid content. Those are the two problems you have to solve.
yeah. So what we ended up doing is realizing after all of this that we were actually on the right track to begin with. My gut instinct was right. So I started to, get kind of empowered by that a little bit. I don't want to say I really hate putting people down that have opinions or ideas. There was a lot of people that wanted, P99 style line racing, and I started to think about it. Does this
Terrible,
really benefit?
dumbest thing ever.
I agree, but hear me out. How would that work in Planes of Power? How would you do a line race in Plane of Time, for example, where you have a set number of players that are allowed to enter or exit?
Yeah. No, I mean, like, just think about. I mean, it just you have to make a rule for every fucking zone with the raid mob, which eventually becomes tons of zones, and
You
it
have to know
becomes
what those rules are.
right.
Yeah.
Every race becomes a headache where a GM basically has to go back and retroactively decide the outcome. Why would you do that to yourself, right? And I know I campaigned hard against this with you all the time.
Yeah. The reason why is because I don't know. I think people were there's some level of Schadenfreude to just how people, and maybe even a bit of Stockholm syndrome, where people fight against their own interests because if they have something that no one else has, the idea of having something that no one else has always outweighs something that everyone has. The problem is EverQuest is actually a challenging game if it works properly. People are always assuming that the quality of a server is that of a TLP. People thought even on this server that they could just go in there and roll up Nagafen, right? And even then, when y'all did that, you had like 80 to 100 players. If you were trying to do that with 72 players and only the mages you had, I don't know if you would have killed Nagafen that first time.
I don't remember the exact numbers. I'm going to do a part 2 of this with another
Yeah,
person. And I'll probably pull out the real numbers. But yeah, I mean, like, I want to ask you more questions about that early
sure.
raid game stuff, but I want to let you continue on it. And I agree that the early raid content, when done as envisioned, is not super easy. People will come back with like Plane of Hate gear and like full buffs and shit, and they'll be like, "Yeah, Nagavit's easy." I'm like, "Not when you're fucking
Yeah,
level
it
30.
is.
He's not.
Yeah.
Not
Also,
when you're naked."
if
Yeah,
you think about what was it? Sky right now. Did you know that even Sky launched about what was it at this point? 20 days ago.
yeah, roundabout.
There's only been 3 guilds that have killed the bees at this point.
It's not
Out of all
surprising.
out of all of them, which is
Which 3 guilds are they?
fantastic. What guilds are they? Hold
Wait,
on.
is it Intervention, Faceless, and one other guild? I know
Yeah,
Faceless did.
it was. Let me look. I think there was a. It's actually. This is going to sound weird. Pals, Tranquility, and Faceless have all killed bees so far. Mayhem and Intervention did not actually get that. Burnouts is pretty close behind them.
I'm
But
surprised
actually,
Intervention didn't do it.
Intervention I think has fallen off a lot. I haven't seen
Uh,
many of them.
that sucks.
Um, yeah, I think a lot of them went back to P99 after the instancing changes. They want to compete. Intervention was full of a lot of P99 style players that liked the competition over there. I
Yeah.
personally didn't. I hated the P99 style of competition, but I will defend people's rights to go back to P99 and do that if they want, because if that's what they enjoy most, come Lucklin or Planes of Power, there's no way that system would work anyway. Even
Your
if they
current
have
system is perfect. You want a system that does not need a constant referee to be present, and that's what your Quakes do right now.
yeah, I let me take a look at this. I was just pulling something up real quick. I think that the entire way we handled raiding has actually reduced aggression across the board.
Mm-hmm.
For example, we changed a lot of rules early on, and we were running problems. We were running afoul of the raid rules. People were finding new creative ways to break the rules. We like to enforce the rules as written. If there's a problem with the rules, Alia or I will rewrite the rules, and then we will start enforcing them from that point onward.
Right.
For
And some guilds
example,
were intentionally setting up situations that
yeah,
would cause rule issues that
yeah.
would require intervention very
I'm not going to
suddenly.
say no. I'm not going to say names, but there was a guild that ended up training someone that was trying to attempt fire giants for the first time. Just an officer in their guild, which means that they
Uh,
represented the guild.
yep.
And
It was in their guild mode to train them.
yeah, it was in their guild MOTD, and it said to train them. I'm not
Yep.
going to say who this was because it's a CSR private issue, but um, it was kind of interesting to just talk to someone, and they said, "No, I meant something else by that." And I said, "You meant something else by training the people in this guild," and they said, "Yeah, I'm sorry." Basically, they gave me a non-answer, and I gave them. I think we gave them a warning at the time, and
It was originally like a 2-week raid suspension, and
yeah,
then it got
one
dialed
week,
back
and
a
then
little
it got
bit.
dialed back to one, I believe. Yeah, but that was we started to realize that people can't behave even if you give them the tools to behave. So we're just like, yeah, we got to automate this. We did that.
Yeah. And some guilds just sought to antagonize other specific guilds because of bad blood or whatever. You know what I mean? But your
And
current
by
system has
too
pretty much
long,
eliminated that.
we realized that a group of 6 people is easier to police in terms of policing the rules. If you have
Right.
6 people, there's less chance of someone being an asset and representing 71 other raiders, for example, in a full raid. Um, and what I realized is that with quakes and simulated respawns, as they're known, we needed to not ever have natural spawns. A GM cannot be present at every single point of the day. The P99 thing of going back and retroactively, fixing an encounter that happened together is
That's a
just
fucking
not
nightmare.
viable. It's nightmarish for the CSR team. It's nightmarish for the players. Imagine killing a creature that you thought was legit, but then someone gets you on a small nuance, and then your loot's revoked.
Yep. Yeah, I was ready for that. I thought that that's how I was worried it was going to go that way. You know what I mean? With Petition Quest, especially because there was a lot of guilds that were trying, like early on, trying to compete with us. That's what guilds were sort of resorting to. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we worked really well with Tranquility and we worked okay with Millers.
Even though
And
Tranquility was an offshoot, you guys all
oh,
got
sorry, no, not Tranquility. I said it wrong. We hated we hated
yeah.
Tranquility. Fuck them.
You were talking about intervention, right?
Intervention. Yeah, we worked really well with Intervention.
I
Tranquility
actually
sucked.
I'm gonna be honest. I really like how Tranquility has formed as a guild. Their leadership has actually interacted proper ever since we started adding instancing. Like they're participating in the same discussion where Arthas, who took over Project Faceless
Yeah.
on our server, they've been communicative. Like they've actually been able to get along with each other. I don't think that's due to any other thing, except due to instancing. I
Well,
think that
there's layers to it, in my opinion, but I
yeah.
think that is necessary. I think it's good that like it's good that I get to walk out as the bad guy, and with me leaving, the bad blood can go away, and Arthas can have a clean slate with these guys.
And that's kind of what happened too.
It was perfect, and Fates, the same thing, walked away at the same time, and me and Fates had a more cutthroat mindset that just
There's
isn't
no need to be
necessary
cutthroat.
anymore.
Yeah,
Right.
we actually got rid of Rule 11. I don't know if you saw that.
I did see that. I lost my rule 11. Well, it's because I think my theory on this, you can't confirm it, okay, because it would be inappropriate for you. But a really annoying person got added to the Rule 11 channel like 2 days before it got deleted, and I was like, I bet this is just because we don't want to fucking hear from this person any more than we already do.
That person actually was in private messages with me for a while, and we kind of resolved it between me, Elia, and this person. They were actually right. There is no drama between players that needed to be addressed anymore. At this point, remember that thing you said about I'm the guild leader, I don't want to address individual players?
Yeah. I mean, like,
Uh,
I'm used to
if
like the
there's a guild
corporate.
leader that's if there's a guild leader that's causing problems, or a member in a specific guild that's causing problems, you address that member by directly suspending or muting or whatever you need to
Right.
that specific member.
Like, I am a player. I am not a member of staff. I do not need to know about customer service actions taken against people who associate with me in game, which that is all it is in a guild,
So
right? They're
in
people who
this case,
associate
the
with you.
person that was added to the Rule 11 channel was actually in the right. We should have given them a timeout or a warning or something like that to knock it off. We shouldn't just put them in Rule 11, because if just the guild leader's in trouble, just the guild leader should get action. If just an officer's in trouble, just the officers get action.
Yeah.
There should be no Rule 11 to hold a guild accountable. That is a relic from when Uber guilds used to run the server. For example, on contested creatures, when there was only rotations on when everyone seems to get along now. One,
Yeah.
because the zones are less popular. Like
Yes.
there's less population overall. We went from 2,000 online peak to about 1,400 peak, which is perfectly fine, by the way. I
Yeah. It's
expected
still
drop
huge.
off because of instancing,
Yeah.
and
No, I mean,
the quality of the players that will be involved are better, and we have a more defined goal for what we're trying to do with the server.
yeah.
So all the people that wanted the P99 cutthroat stuff can go back to P99, which they did, by the way. If you look at the population growth, there's a population growth called Unix Geek, which tracks EQ Emulator server population. P99 saw a slow and steady growth over the last 2 months. And the reason for this is because people were just simply either bored of Classic. You know what that feels like, doing a TLP server for 3 months where you're stuck in Classic and you can't get any more loot.
Yep. No,
That drop off will always happen,
oh
no
yeah.
matter
No,
what you do.
that's what I was saying. Your attrition, I think, is just like natural attrition that happens in
Yeah.
classic EQ. So nothing to worry
When
about. I bet
Kunark
with
comes
Kunark,
out, people are going to be very excited. I have
right.
three real life friends that are waiting for Kunark to come out before they start playing. They want to play an XR.
Yeah, you'll
So
hit
I
TK
actually
again.
took that suggestion from a person on Reddit, actually. I forget who it was, but they said, Secrets, you should release Kunark early just to get everything going. And I was like, no, I'm going to stick to the timeline, but I can release just XRs for just Kunark early. And we're doing that at the 8th month mark of Classic.
So 1 month of XRs just living it up on
1 to
Kunark.
50, yeah.
That's pretty
Because if
cool.
you think about it, lore wise, XRs didn't just a bunch of baby XRs. They didn't just have 9 months pass and then there's a bunch of baby XRs there. No,
Right. They had 8 months and then
they
no,
had
I'm
eight
just
months
kidding.
and then um, no, there was a bunch of established Sublician Empire had the lore stuff happen there, and then the
Yeah.
Keblician Empire had been there when the expansion launches. It's not like this is a recent society, so you're going to be able to play the Keblician Empire before the other adventurers had found it, which
I
I
know my
thought was an
friend
interesting
Larry is going to love that, bringing Legacy of
legacy
Vic.
of Vic.
Yeah.
I quite literally thought later, I was like, didn't Larry do something like this? Oh, Larry's going to love that.
He's going to love it. Yeah. I think that's great.
Yeah, I did that because lore wise, it makes sense. We're gonna do this for Beast Lords and Luckland too, just because that's cool to do.
So, what did you think of the way the server raid scene originally developed? Like, what did you think of those server first kills? Was anything surprising to you, or did it pretty much go the way you expected?
I was surprising that it took that many players to kill Lord Nagafin. I was expecting people to do it with 40. I was
Mm,
very surprised that people didn't just straight up level a bunch of mages and then get to max level and then just pet wall it like entirely. That by the time you all had killed Lord Nagafin, I was expecting 40 mages to just pet wall this stuff down. That was the strategy on every single TLP or TLE or whatever it's called
right.
earlier. And I was expecting you to just go with the same strategy. But no, there was actual clerics, there were druids, there were wizards, there were melee classes, there was a pool team and everything. So
I mean,
that was
we
interesting to
went
me.
planning to mage wall them, and we're just like anybody above this level could come. I think we said anyone 30 plus can come. But the problem is the dragons are leashed to their rooms, so there's
Yeah,
no wall to wall them with. You know what I mean? Like The classic mage wall involves a geometry exploit. You're familiar with it, so but
Yeah, I remember doing it on Agnar. You and I
yeah,
played on Agnar together. So
some of the listeners might not be familiar with this. You put the mage pet. It, NPCs have a larger attack range, which is the fundamental part of this. They have a larger attack range than players, and they can attack without direct line of sight. Like, so if there's a thin wall, Nagafin and Vox and a mage pet, Jabobber, will just swing right through that and melee each other. But they do need line of sight for spells. So Nagafin and Vox will stand there on the other side of the wall on a corner, and they'll fight the pets. They'll never use a single AE because they lack line of sight. And the pets will just, they'll never be able to, kill all the pets before you summon new ones, and you just kill the dragons easy mode. But because of the leashing, they would leash before they hit a wall that you could reliably pet wall with. So it became a crazy battle at level 30 doing that shit. And the EXP rate was incredibly slow on Quarm. I think a little bit slower than we even expected, which is
it was
why
intentional, actually.
I like it. For the record, I like it. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely why I think we still only had one level 50 when we did Nagafin and that means on the whole server. No, we had two. We had Puv and we had Arson. There was two level 50s on the server when we killed the dragons.
Yeah, I think that was insane to me to just watch that kill. I'll be completely honest. The entire process of organizing that probably didn't take as much as I thought it would. You had the, wrench in the middle of things when you realized Nagafin would leash. I don't think anyone realized that was going to happen. That kind of
No.
opened the door to future changes for raid content, because I thought a lot of the early game was just incredibly easy.
Yeah.
I think we ended up with Kha'Zix Thul having 64,000 hit points instead of the 32,000 hit points. And the
That's
reason
pretty
for
cool.
this is because we buffed a lot of the old planner gear and put proper stats on the gear. For example, there was a Bard helm with Wisdom on it, I believe. The
Yeah.
Imbrued helm. We corrected that to the proper stat, which would be in.
Yeah.
Then I decided to make a couple different changes. Those wands that are otherwise junk and hate and fear, they now have stats on them. And and players initially were, I also like to look at player sentiment just even on a fundamental level. There were a lot of players that just were upset by this change. They thought because I was touching Brad McQuaid's child that in this way that the server was ruined, and this is going to open the floodgates to custom quest or something like that. And I just felt the plains loot sucked. Everyone knows it.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knew that the plains loot had itemization issues. I
But
wanted
it's
to
because
fix
they
them.
had like different plans for how certain stats would work that just never got fully realized, right?
Yeah, even before they had, I mean, the planes came out later than launch, but they had plans for Kunark to change a lot of the stats, and that never went to fruition.
Yep.
Basically, they were in the conceptual stage, and I think at some point maybe they just had designers working on it that just quite literally did not know what the stats did, and they just put them willy nilly on a bunch of gear. So I was like, let's fix that. Also, the clickies, I felt like it was a crime that only this Play to Sky items could be recharged. If you have three different planes and you could have these ones that drop, the reason they weren't ever updated is because the planes never came out at the same time.
Right.
When I see Classic, I think the planes were an extension to Classic. In the same way that I think the whole that contains Master EL is again an extension of Classic. That is something that if they had done this on launch and the zone was ready for release, they would have released the whole. They would have released the planes.
Right.
But now that we have the ability to stagger this release, we should be able to do that, and I did. So in the future, I might add recharging via mana batteries to those items, like the Allure Wand or something like that. We might have to add cast times so they're not instant cast or something like that, but we should be able to, like the Wizard Clarity Wand, that isn't totally game breaking, especially once we start getting into when C2 is available. It doesn't
Yes.
invalidate enchanters, it doesn't invalidate anything about the game other than you couldn't do this in Classic. It is a
Right.
quality of life tweak that is billed as a quality of life tweak. I think people did not resonate with that as well as they could have because they weren't ready for the game that they knew and loved to have any changes. But in reality, I think if someone were, we talk about Classic Plus with World of Warcraft, right? Like, what would that entail? I think Project Quarm is kind of like an unofficial season of discovery in the same vein that Turtle WoW is in terms of customization. It's the same spirit of Classic, but slightly improved in ways that would otherwise not destroy game balance, but at least give players a little less of a headache.
Yep. I think you've done a good job of treading that very fine line. There's things I don't necessarily agree with, but I think nothing has hampered the gameplay experience. You know what I mean? I think overall it's the total sum net benefit, and it's positive. And I think personally, despite what I would consider like a chaotic first few months and definitely some stressful times because of like the rapid rule changes, I think Quarm is the number one place to play EverQuest right now.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to actually kind of admit to out loud when you think about like I have been trying to be more humble over the years, and it led me to not brag about things like having Project Quarm being the best place to play something. I personally wouldn't play on anywhere else other than Project 1999 on any release and Project Quarm, mainly because I
What
made
about
it
the
as the game.
25th anniversary TLP though?
I'm playing that for other reasons. I love the idea of personas.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Darkfall did an amazing job on that system, and given the team that they have to work with, I think they pulled it off.
yeah.
I'm more worried about the other issues that might happen on the TLP. Like, is the rule set's going to be something that we like to see? Is this going to be a rehash of Mischief? Because I'll play a rehash of Mischief. I'm looking to
Yeah.
play a Shadow Knight. I finally have to show Sazabi up at some point.
He's on
I've never
Quarm,
played
right?
one. He is on Quorum right
Yeah,
now.
he's in
Actually,
Faceless. Big
he
Sazabi.
is.
He's so impressive. He was level 49, and I was like, Sazabi, when are you going to join the guild? And he's like, I thought I had to be 50 to join. I was like, not you, buddy.
Yeah, it's Sazabi. You get in it because you're Sazabi at that
Right?
point.
I would tag you at level 0, bro. Come on.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean,
are you going to play with Faceless on the TLP?
if y'all are playing, I will probably play. The problem is, I have an actual day job. EverQuest is incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
Also, everyone's going to be running potions on launch. I'm not buying potions on their marketplace. I am not that rich to do that.
Yeah.
I remember on Agnar, I spent over $200 on launch on just XP potions, on run speed potions, because I was trying to get to a group quickly. I spent something on their gambling crate. I will call them gambling crates, by the way, because that's what they are.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
I I spent a lot of money on them because I actually wanted to, support them. They were doing something that I really resonated with, a Planes of Power server. It didn't feel like EverQuest in the end, but it was at least unique enough that it had some arcadey, style mechanics to it.
It could get really expensive now. The meta is getting so stupid that like you don't even run to other places. You just race change potion to whatever race is closest to your destination and
Oh,
then hit origin
jeez.
to save 5 minutes.
That is insane to me. I'm going to be honest, that's kind of terrifying to think about.
Yeah.
I looked at the cost of World of Warcraft rating on retail right now. People spend an absurd amount of money on server transfers and gold just to get a head up in the race on RNG. That's terrifying to me. And there is
Yes.
spent people have spent like $30,000 on on a content drop just to get the world first. And I was like, whoa, I don't think I could spend that kind of money. And the only people that can end up, pulling that off are these guilds that have actual sponsors behind them that want to clear the content first. And at that point, I feel like I'm way behind everyone.
I have a real problem with that kind of stuff personally.
I do. I do too.
Like when Blade and Soul came out in America for the first time, it's
Oh
like
no! Don't even get me started on that.
Did you play that?
I played a summoner, yeah, on launch.
Okay, baby, there we go. I was a destroyer, and
Oh no!
I was a young single guy at the time, so I had just nothing but money to blow on. I was in the military. I just lived wherever they told me to live. I had nothing to spend on all my money on. I spent $5,000 and the in-game store.
$2,000 on that game, and I regret every single second and every cent I spent on that game. I actually spent so much money on that game that NCSoft banned my account because they thought I was spending too much.
Oh my gosh! There you go.
Yeah, and I had to use industry connections with someone that actually worked there to get the review and get that overturned. This is when I was like 1 year into the games industry at this point. The game had a cheating problem too. It was Unreal 3, and I remember there was a summoner bot problem for a while there where
I remember
you could
seeing
kill them.
that.
Yeah, this was a big problem with all these Eastern games. They were client side in a lot of way. I basically had to glitch the game into letting me kill this cheater because they couldn't kill me. I could kill them. So yeah, that was the whole problem. I ended up at like Platinum 6 by the end of it,
Do you
which
remember?
was
Did you ever do any of the raiding? Did you ever kill Black Worm?
I didn't do any of the raiding. I was just a PvP ranked
Gotcha.
uh, crap lord, if you will. Uh,
Yeah,
but that was a fun game to me. I enjoyed that game.
I love it. I mean, it was
Fighting
a lot of fun.
KFMs was on a class that was incredibly outmatched by them, but just outplaying them felt very great. And of
Yeah.
course, the next season, Summoners fell off, and I just lost interest. So
Hmm. I love
yeah,
all those grindy Korean MMOs. But I
I
have
thought it was fantastic
that game is where I realized I had a real problem with like
with spending money. Yeah, same.
yeah, like what are they called? Loot crates. Yeah, I need to keep myself away from loot crates. When the
Oh
halfling
yeah.
mask came out, I think the
Oh
halfling
no!
mask was on
Don't
that loot crate for
remember. I
mischief.
think it was Sorrows who spent 6 of those. Remember that?
Yeah, he had a ton of them.
Holy shit!
I opened like 90 crates on stream during mischief launch trying to get the halfling mask and I didn't get it. And I was like, I need to stop. I'm gonna like destroy my life if I don't like get this mask soon. It's crazy because like you get sunk cost. You're like, okay, well after 50 crates, surely the next crate. I mean, odds have to roll up sometimes. No, they don't.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too much on a tangent there. Can you tell us a little bit about the future of Quarm? What you see going on? Like, is there more custom content or changes you want to see with like Valius, Lucklin, and Pop? And what do you plan to do after Pop?
So, what I'm planning on actually doing for the future of Quorum, we're going to continue our holiday event cadence. I think that we use it a five-fingered approach where you have smaller events every other month, and then you have maybe a major event like 5 times a year. My 5 major events are going to be April 1st, Valentine's Day. You're going to have something like 4th of July. You're going to have Halloween, and you're going to have Christmas. Those will be the big major holiday events we run. In between, we might run something like adding Bloody Kithakor as a permanent event. You pick which one
Oh,
you want to side with, and
yeah.
then every so often you'll push back the tide of undead. You can actually work together to pick if you want the zone to stay undead or not. You can start killing Kithakor and his followers in the forest, and then you can turn it into General Vigera or someone who wants to actually keep control of that forest. So we could have players, not fight each other over that, but do these quests, and at the end of whatever cycle that happens, you can have the forest turned to undead based on the amount of quests complete. That's the idea I had for that.
I
Same
think
with
it's really cool.
there's going to be little things like that are because of the event Alia ran with the 4 AONs. GM events are off the table. They do not resonate. They feel like you feel like you'll have FOMO because you're not online at the time they happened. So we
So
had
you're
to
saying
revoke
GM
those.
events are off the table because so many people cried about the one GM event that was done, right? That's just
Yeah,
to just to clarify.
just to clarify, that's why. And I
Yeah.
mean, I kind of understand, and I kind of have empathy for that. If I'm not on because I was, watching a sports ball game that night, I'm going to be understandably pissed. Like that's just how I'm going to be. I'm like, I wish I was on for that. Some people will be more disappointed, but I'm going to be mad at myself for not playing the game 24/7,
Right.
which is against the ethos of our game design. So that's kind of how we did. In the future, I'd like us to do a demake of the Serpent Spines expansion after Blades of Power. There, if you look at the EverQuest cloth map that was first released, there are a lot of areas that were never touched upon. The Vasty Deep,
Yep.
the
Loping
Serpent
plains.
Spine, Loping Plains, they were
Yeah.
touched on in EQ2 actually, but those areas are ripe for the pickings for cool and custom content. I'd like us to get the ability to add new zones and then modify those zones after. Like we can make new creature types, we can make new zone geometry from scratch that we would, own the rights to. It wouldn't be a replacement for anything in the game client. It would just be something that would enhance and be copyright free that we could distribute. Because if we try and distribute, like Gates of Discord or Legacy of Ukesha, and then tell people to install it, that's going to be a nightmare for acquisition. People aren't going to want to do that just to go to a Legacy of Ukesha zone. So I'm taking the custom quest style thing, and we might add small little areas or expansions. I'd love to do a Serpent Spine demake because that area is incredible. I love the idea of that area, but we can also redo it in the style of classic Everquest. We don't have to follow one for one the task system that was made, the zone layout. We don't have to make Crescent Reach exactly 1-to-1. We can do it in a classic EQ style, and I think that would be cool because Live has their version of Crescent Reach, which is perfect for the era that it was released in. We need one that would be perfect for the Planes of Power era. And Legacy of Kesha is just when that started to go to hell and back.
I think the idea of demaking in general is super awesome. I saw like someone demade Bloodborne into like a PS1 Bloodborne game. That stuff is
I
just so
resonate
cool.
with that stuff.
Yeah. So
yeah,
that sounds like
a
really awesome future. I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see that
Yeah.
stuff. I hope you get Meldraths in there. I would love to
Meldrath's
see
Menagerie, or no, that's Miragul's Menagerie.
Miragul's, yeah, but Meldrath's Fortress
Lair and
Mechanitus.
such. Yeah. That would be cool to get in there. There's so much, or even the Underfoot area that was off of the hole, because there's still technically the zone line there.
That would be great cool too. There's so much. Add the Plane of Disease portal in Western Corona and have that like a demade POD version with old school Burtox. That would be really cool.
That'd be really cool. Do you remember what we did for the Shard of Decay? That's kind of the thing I was looking towards doing, but more in depth. There's no there was only a handful of things to do in the Shard of Decay for Halloween.
Yeah.
I would love to do like a proper EverQuest expansion in the style of, say, Kunark or Velius. Has new player content, maybe a new race edition, or even just a new entire area with its own lore, its own factions, things to get attached to, that sort of thing.
There's so much you can expand with factions to make like there should be almost like a ring war possibility with every faction. You know what I mean? Like, why doesn't Sir Lucan just roll up on Kanos if you do a quest line? And
why doesn't
the whole militia,
the Sabertooth of Blackburrow ever get? You can get faction with them by killing the Shorefall Glade inhabitants, or
right, but you can't do anything with it.
You can't do anything with it. It just stays there. Why can't you ally with the Gnolls?
You should always off of any intelligent race. You should be able to have some kind of interaction.
Even orcs. I mean, the Dark Elves made friends with the orcs, right? So there's got to be a clan of intelligent orcs out there, or at least dumb enough orcs that can interact similar to trolls. I mean, technically, orcs are more intelligent in the game than trolls are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, I know you don't have too much more time secrets, but I think one thing we have to go through while I have you here is we got to talk about Fungi Gate and start from
Fungi Gate. Oh no,
start from day one and go with how.
I'm going to try and get through this quick because I only got so much time too.
Yeah. Okay.
So
you found the guy cheating in Befallen, right? We'll start with that part.
Yeah. So we found a player cheating in Befallen, and this person was speed hacking.
Yep.
We knew they were speed hacking because we wrote code prior to launch that determined whether someone was speed hacking or not.
And he was in Faceless.
He was in Faceless. You didn't know about who he was.
This was like just day one. This guy's like level 12, right? That's.
And I started noticing repeated triggers of the speed hack code. I'm like, oh, okay, I got to go check this out. I knew this was going to happen eventually, but I had to go check out and see what they were doing. They were teleporting everywhere, all over the damn place. And they were, I talked to Alia and I said, hey, look at this. I sent you this video. I just banned this. Can I ban this person? And Alia said, no, let's try and set them up. So we created a character we're going to say this is the scenario. The character's camped out and Befallen in this one room. We're going to yell train to zone, and we're going to see if this person speed hacks to the entrance, because they've speed hacked across the common lands. Why wouldn't they just use this to get to safety so they don't lose XP or their position or where they are or something like that? So they do. As soon as we log in and Alia takes this person with, I think it was Valor or whatever the HP buff is, to the zone line and yells train, this person gets up, goes Mach 10 to the zone line.
Yep.
And then I go on the other side. I said, nope, ain't going to happen. I kick the player. And they get banned. That's the end of it, you right?
And then I kicked him out of the guild because you told me it was a member of the guild.
Yeah, I was like, here's a speed hacker. Zaide, you need to take care of this because rule 11, I got to keep an eye on things.
Right.
So
now, I had two officers in my guild at this time, Notorious and Black, who were both from Without Regret on Yellonak.
Yeah. And there was also this person that got banned for speed hacking. Now we're going to get into
he was
how
not an officer yet.
No, he's not an officer yet. We're getting that
Yeah,
too.
I
We're
didn't
getting
know
to
that these
that.
guys were related at all, but
There
we
was a
find out.
second account I actually haven't told you about where we saw the same person that we just banned from Faceless on a level 11 mage who was speed hacking. I was like, oh god, not this again. How prevalent is this stuff? It was the same person.
Hmm.
And then Elliot's like, okay, we got to scorch earth this person. We did warn people about repeated offenses and related accounts. And so we look at IPs and we ban a third account. And then this person decides maliciously to contact me and say, hey, please just give me a chance. I didn't know I was doing anything wrong. I said, I don't want to talk to you. They contacted me from a second Discord account. And I said, please stop contacting me. And what do? They shut up for, I guess, the next week.
Yeah, it was like a week before something popped off again, and it popped
Yeah.
off big that time.
Yeah. This time, there was an officer in a guild, Faceless, that was speed hacking. Elias saw them and caught them. I think, who did we catch first? Was it Notorious?
No, I don't think so. I think it was drug. It was drug because he was
It
the
was
same guy.
Drug, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So
Drug got
got to
hit
go
by
narrative
this.
with this really quick. After this guy gets banned, I think it's nothing, right? And then a few days later, Notorious and Black, who are currently my officers, introduce me to a friend of theirs who wants to apply, and he's going to level up fresh, but he wants to be the DKP officer. He's willing to do it. He did it for them in the past. I was like, okay, word. No one wants to do DKP, so happy to let this guy do DKP. He doesn't need to be like raid level to be able to do DKP, so let's make it happen. And while he's leveling up, they're all leveling their alts because they were already high level, and they start letting him play their characters while they sleep. So he's playing Suda, Black, Notorious, and Pied's characters for them occasionally while they're taking breaks.
Yep. And there is a character, and this is an officer that these two people vouched for. Later, should I mention the screenshot that you
Yeah,
sent me?
absolutely. Yeah. So you're talking about the Notorious screenshot?
Yeah, the one with the
Yeah,
pet with MacroQuest in it, because we know that's from MacroQuest because the pet name was under it.
right. So Notorious got in an argument with a player or something, and they sent me a tell about it, a player in the guild. And I was like, okay, I talked to them, and I felt like the player in the guild was in the right, and Notorious was a little bit out of hand, out of pocket with how he treated that person. So I was like, hey, Notorious, I need you to like make amends with this person, and tell him you're sorry, you didn't mean it to, to be a jerk or whatever. He's like, okay, and he sent me a screenshot showing me the conversation in his text log there, and I'm looking at the screenshot, and there's a bunch of mage pets and charm pets. And under the mage pet, it says like level 37 warrior. And under the charm pet, it says the name of the pet owner. I was like, dude, what's up with your pet names? And he's like, I don't know.
So it
Yeah. And I was
turns
like,
out
that's MacroQuest, bro.
that Notorious had his client set up by Drug, his alleged friend that he vouched for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the end of this, I'm like, okay, these people are clearly using MacroQuest. I think Ilya gets you all on a call and says, hey, look, we got to talk. Y'all are cheating. What happened? I don't know actually the contents of that call, and I'm going to save that for, I guess, a second DramaQuest interview, right?
No, I mean, I know roughly, like basically Pied was totally innocent. He didn't know these guys before. Pied was like
Yeah,
someone else that we knew who had just was in their static group. So he met them and was leveling
yeah,
up with them. But the other three guys were all from Without Regret, and they all knew Drug. And I think supposedly Drug's like one of their nephews.
yeah.
They all knew he was using. None of this shit was hidden. They all knew about the MacroQuest. They all knew about all this stuff, and they thought that they just wouldn't get caught.
Yeah.
And then they did. And then they all played dumb. Drug got permabanned again. And then Alia was like, okay, I will unban your accounts because you shared accounts with him. So never share accounts again. And I know that you guys weren't personally cheating, supposedly. So I'll give you your accounts back, but I'm deleting all the gear.
Yep. That did
And
happen.
then what happened there? Then, due to some drama over fire giants, Notorious and Suda began plotting to form a new guild, which became Tranquility.
Yeah.
And Black went over with them, and they revealed to me a few weeks earlier that Black was actually becoming a GM on the server
Yeah.
secretly.
Yeah, so because he actually revealed that to you, that's a violation of trust, which we had a unspoken rule that anyone that would violate trust would actually end up as, suspended for like from their GM duties, or they would have to pick being a player. And we said if any CSR ever gets caught, they get a fungi tunic for whoever reported them.
Yeah.
And this is not something we written down in our rules anywhere. It was something that I said in passing, and we showed that we were serious about it. So Zaide got a fungi for ratting his officer that did something shitty, or rather, other people around his officer that did something shitty. I still don't know if Black had done anything out of line besides maybe class clarity on a few groups, but that's very negligent, or it's negligible at most. Not negligent, it's negligible at most compared to the abuses that Drug had done and the other people in your guild. So I
Well,
mean,
he was giving us inside information on CSR tickets, and
oh, he was. I actually didn't know that.
yeah, and I mean, like, he was part of that team of people that were cheating, which is, its whole own box of worms. But I
one
reported
one second,
him.
Zaid. 1 second.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm almost done. Just getting them up here. Come on.
Okay. All right. So I I scrolled back up to our chat here to check on how this all went down, and basically I was talking to you about when Notorious got banned and everything, and his MacroQuest screenshot that he sent to us, and I was like, he says that he didn't know how it was working, and like someone else set up TAC-P for him, and I was like, he's literally saying that it was one of your GMs who helped him get set up, and you're like, what GM? And I was like I was like, Black. He's like, Darkness or Shadow is his GM name, and that's how it was. I wasn't like I was running to you to tattle, right?
Yeah. And I was like, whoa, this is all new information for me.
That was, yeah. So this was when I was trying to get Notorious unbanned. I'm like, dude, one of your GMs set his shit up, so it's on them.
Yeah.
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 But yeah, you were like, you can have a Fungi Tunic. I was like, I'm not going to take a fucking Fungi Tunic. That is crazy, dude. People
You
will
know
lose their
exactly
shit.
what the optics are going to be if I give you a Fungi Tunic.
Right.
And then you come back at a couple, like, I think it was a month later,
Yeah. And I
like
was like, I'll take
secrets.
the Fungi Tunic.
And I knew there was ulterior motive. I just didn't know what it was. And at the
Well, at the
time, I
time, I
could
was
have
just
guessed.
bored.
What was that?
At the time, I was just like bored. You know what I mean? I was like, okay, I'll level up
Oh,
a melee, and
oh,
I was
there
like,
was actually no ulterior motive then. I thought it was because, um, I thought you just wanted to get rid of that whole system because you thought it was dumb at the
no,
time.
no.
That's what I
Well,
thought.
what happened
Oh my
was
god.
I complained to Alia about it. I was like, dude, I can't believe he's trying to give me a Fungi Tunic. Alia was like, no, that's like a real rule, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that was
But
something Ellie and I had decided on. We considered a CSR leaking any information to be an egregious violation of trust. So for me, I just think that was just like something we should do because we mentioned it in passing. And then of course the optics come out and it's like Zaid's got a fungi. And then someone posts on Reddit, oh, Zaid's got a fungi. Oh, someone's talking about on stream. And did you see Zaid got a fungi? And I look in the Discord. It's unfair. Why they're giving fungis out to everyone today?
yeah, it's funny. Like that was when I was basically like I was kind of bored and like wrapping up my time on the server. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go take this Fungi Tunic. I'm gonna stand in the EC tunnel and wait. And I just stood there for a couple hours and watched Discord for the word fungi to appear. And sure enough,
The fungi
pals
appeared.
pals started losing their shit about me having a
Yeah.
Fungi Tunic on a level 20 rogue, and I just stood back and watched the fireworks for a couple days.
I mean, admittedly, I should have predicted the optics and just said no, we're not actually doing that.
100%.
But
Yeah.
but at the same time, I was like, this is going to cause some kind of stir. I don't know if any publicity is great publicity, but I was just like, sure, let's go with it. So eventually, I decided no, we're revoking the fungi. I think it was like 11 o'clock at night, and I hop on a stream. I told my nestmate, hey, I'm gonna be going on stream. And I got to address some drama. It's very drowsy, and
Yeah.
then oh, we addressed the all the drama. We did all that, and then we removed your fungi,
Yep.
and then we gave you a title. And I said, "What do you want your title?" Because we're gonna make going forward. If someone else a CSR, you get a title, a surname with a title in it. And you said the Nerd Slayer, and I was like, "That's on brand. I'm going for it."
I thought I wanted that title because people were so butthurt about having the fungi. I was like, oh, I'm just like slaying these nerds over here with
You are
this.
slaying these nerds
Yeah.
verbally with this, and I was like, yeah, that fits. Sure, that works.
That was the time when people were just like always really salty about faceless, and there was just like maximum belief that there was like, we were getting unfair treatment or whatever. But
Yeah, which is kind of funny, because if there's anyone that was getting unfair treatment at that point, it was definitely not y'all.
we were getting unfair levels of scrutiny. I felt, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
Like
absolutely.
people were up. Alia's doing a good
Elliot
job.
was,
Alia was being thorough, but Alia was up
yeah,
my ass every day, dude.
I remember that, and rightfully so. To be fair, if you know nothing about the people that you're up the ass with,
Yeah,
you need to know everything about these people before you can understand what they're actually doing. And
yeah.
there's like Zaide complicit with these officer corps that had betrayed Zaide at this point. Is Pied actually involved? Pied was not involved. Pied was innocent in all this, and I thought
Pied
that
is like the
was,
most innocent person in EQ, dude. He's like nothing
he
but
was
good
really
vibes, help
upset.
people out.
And the about the whole ban, but I was also really upset, just because he's just been an early supporter of our server, and then he just kind of dropped off because of this whole drama. And this kind of thing is why we have the rules, right?
Yeah,
People really hate when someone actually, gets on your case about something like this. I personally just think that it's a tragedy, really, that um, he got caught up in that.
yeah, it was. But
I
those four
I like
guys,
them. I liked all the people that were involved in this drama, except until they gave me a reason not to.
yeah,
EverQuest is run by people that are loving the game. Like, these guilds are run by people that are loving the game, and when you see them do something, you're just more disappointed in them, not so
right?
actually angry.
Yeah,
So,
disappointed dad.
uh,
So those four guys who, well, three of them, right? Suda, Notorious, and Black, who helped start like a little mutiny and went over and began forming Tranquility. Like 2 weeks later, they got permabanned because they were
yeah,
cheating again.
which is kind of peak irony at that point.
Right, like Notorious, or not Notorious, a Drug or whatever. I think Mesmerize, and then Drug, and then something else. He came back a third time, and of course got caught.
Yeah, and I think I've actually banned alts of him a couple other times. I just can't confirm they're him because he changed his IP, I think, since then. There
Yeah,
was actually someone that got banned for speed hacking when I was streaming the other day, and they started popping up in logs. And that there's actually a clip of that I can show you after the
that's so funny.
podcast. Yeah, and I just started to realize we actually have some solid detections. The game's finally running itself. My stress levels are high because I'm constantly getting in everyone's way, and I just need to, just stand back and let this thing kind of run itself at this point until there's a major expansion release.
No, yeah, the server is in such a great state with the instancing. Everyone's getting along. There's not a lot of bad blood. Everyone I talk to about Quarm is just happy and loves it. The pace is great. The content is great. Your changes are all great. I couldn't say enough about how good the server is, and I recommend it to anyone who wants to play old school EQ. It is the best way to play EverQuest right now.
I'm hoping the 25th TLP actually learns from this, because I
No
I
chance.
don't I don't I don't hate other ways to play the game. I just made the game that I wanted to make the most. If I saw something that I wanted in EverQuest, I now have this medium in which to do it without having to argue with any developer, with any designer, with any person who runs their own server. I can just do it. And
Yeah,
generally, I don't think I'm like the best designer out there. I just think that I've played this game long enough to pick out things that I didn't like about the game and then just fix them.
yeah.
And I'm hoping P99 learns from our legacy item system. That would work there, by the way. I hope they replace the list system with this for Green 2.0 if they ever do one. And I hope that Live ends up learning from some of the other loot lockout systems, or even just certain nuances that make EverQuest EverQuest. There's a lot of, changes to Live that they haven't undone and have replaced with Mitigation of the Mighty. A lot of EverQuest's early challenge is just due to the combat mechanics, and TLP has always used the live version of the game with balance changes to mimic what Classic was like. But it's not. They've used like the AAs that give you passive bonuses at certain level milestones. I think that's actually something that could work really well. They just need to go in all of that and start doing Classic Plus. They need to not just be restricted by how something was, but how something should be. And that's kind of what I did with Quarm. So if they do that, they'll do great. Now, do they are going to get that time allocation? Darkfall's a company. They are there to make money.
Right.
You won't ever see a true one box server. You'll see a true box server, but you won't actually see a one box server from them because the time required to actually do that at a AAA company, or even like a double A or an indie. At this point, Darkfall is an indie studio. They have about 40 people or less working for their company on
Yeah.
EverQuest. Probably less than 20 actually allocated to EverQuest One specifically.
Yeah.
They aren't a powerhouse of a studio that they used to be. But they are still doing the best with what they have. And as someone who is working in a team that is extremely small and even smaller than what's working on EQ Live, I feel for the pain of doing that while also having to meet your yearly goals. There's a lot of things, even at my day job, where I'm like, I wish I could change this, but I don't have the time for it because this other task takes greater priority. Even though I know this other task will be better for the product in general, I still have to do that other task before I can get to the fun tasks. And then you're always in this vicious cycle of doing the fun tasks after, and you only get so many of them per year. I
Yeah.
think Personas was like kind of one of their fun tasks from what it sounded like. The fact that it went into a major box expansion release was just icing on the cake. I hope they do more of things like that on the event calendar.
I
I
sort of
read that.
think that I don't know this, but I think Persona might have been Koala's idea before she got hired by another company, and that's why they weren't even sure if they could do it. When they first announced it, they were like, "Yeah, we don't even know if we'll be able to do this," and they managed to get it
Koala
done.
just seemed like she knew exactly what she wanted to do, and then she had the engineering talent behind her to do it.
She was the best. Yeah, she was
I
great.
I listened to your interview with her, and I could just see that she exuded passion for design. She just kind of felt limited in a lot of ways, and she wasn't saying it out loud because she's legally probably not obligated to talk crap about her employer. No one is. But I would also say that maybe if they had a few extra resources, which they can't do right now, the only reason Project Quarm is able to run on what it's able to do is because we all work for free. If we
Yeah,
had to start paying everyone and charging a $15 a month sub, we couldn't pay even but one person.
right.
And that's the difference between running Darkfall, which needs Chrono by necessity of actually surviving as a company because they put all their eggs into Chrono years ago, and that's an irrevocable decision. Let's say their investors at EG7 say, you don't have Chrono anymore. Why are you doing this? They're going to push back and say, you need to put that back in. That was making us all of our money. Even if the players don't want it, they still need to do it because it's a catch 22 there. If you remove it, the game would be better, but would you still make as much money? No, you definitely would not. They're inexplicably twined to the concept of Chrono, which is bad for the players, but also great for the game's long term health. And I do not ever blame them for doing that either. I know how
Right.
that feels. I would rather eat a meal when I go home from work each day than have to deal with having to feel the pain of losing my job because I had put something of the interest of the players above my own well-being and safety. Because realistically, this is a job for the people that work at Daybreak, right? So they're not going to be able to do certain things because it's intertwined with their ability to continue to be paid. And that sucks in industry, and that's also kind of why I have Project Quarm. Even when everything looks terrible in industry, I could at least, at the end of the day, go work on Project Quarm, have complete freedom, not have to pay a single dime except for the server hosting cost, which is extremely cheap, which is $200. I have a team of people that align with my vision, and I can also just kind of enjoy the fact that I have something that I can consider partially my own, but the best version of something I grew up with, which is way more important to me as a human being to have that level of goal satisfaction that doing a job doesn't always give you. And I think that's important. And if I was working on EverQuest at Darkball, people were always like, "Secrets, why don't you just go work for Darkball? You could change things around there." And I was like, "No, I couldn't. If I worked there, I would be miserable. The moment I'd have to do something that wouldn't align with their core business values, I would be fired because I wouldn't do my job, and I know a lot of the things I want to do would not align with their core business philosophy,
I mean,
and that's the necessity of doing the job, right? So I that's why I don't do it. I don't think I
dark
would be able to do my stuff.
dark pod devs do some shady stuff too that you would think would jeopardize their jobs at times. Like the newest raid content release for live came out, right? And it had 2 events. Normally there's 3, but this time there was only 2 events. Okay, so all the guilds, these don't require like qualifying or flagging or anything, right? So as soon as it comes out, every guild just picks an event and you do the event or you do the other event, right? Now, one of the events was bugged, and every guild that went to that event first pretty much got fucked. It wouldn't spawn.
Yeah.
The guild that went to the correct event first, and then as soon as the next event was fixed, before anyone else knew it was fixed, they went and did that event.
So they
Had
could first it.
Yeah, so they could get it first. Had 2 devs in it.
You know what I'm thinking
It
about
seems
with that?
suspicious to
It
me.
seems suspicious, but at the end of the day, games like EverQuest, where you're working underpaid, the entire industry is underpaid. Just to be very clear, you might be able to make decent money working in the games industry if you're like a lead, and you'd make less than you would as a mid-tier engineer. Like right now, I'm underpaid for my position.
Right, because
I
you're
like my
getting abused for your passion and stuff, right?
Yeah, so what I would say is I'm underpaid, but I don't consider that abuse for one distinct difference. I have a CEO that cares about me, a player base that's depending on me to do the job, and then 3, I have some level of altruism that gets fulfilled when I do my day job. I am servicing a game that I grew up with. Again, this is like a game from 2010, so I was once a player in this game. I know what the players in this game actually feel. I feel their pain when I read their posts, and I'm working with a company that actually aligns with my vision for fixing this. That's like the ultimate storm. And if you're there are a lot of times where I've done something that the players would consider that, like, not even just in this company but in the industry in general. I've seen it. Someone makes a massive freaking mistake that would have compromised the brand in some way if they didn't play damage control, right? You've seen this a
Right.
lot. Developers in EverQuest would, leak strats to each other in EverQuest 2 and World of Warcraft. This is not just a Daybreak or Darkfall issue. It's more of it's very easy to screw up with the knowledge you have and make an error. If you don't know everything in the game and you announce something that's not supposed to happen, and then every other person on your team suffers for one when you do that, but you might not even know that you're causing them to suffer. You might not even know this is a problem. A new community manager can go into a game that they barely even know, but they're hired due to their experience, and absolutely screw up everything. And it could be that, yes, this is fixed, and the developer in their guild is saying, we should go do this now that it's fixed. I hope everyone was paying attention. We just posted this in the patch notes today. Or they didn't even remember to post it in the patch notes. They just did it. That's going to look bad on them, but I think it's worse when you don't actually. Things are going to happen like that. Companies are going to want to sweep them under the rug, but they do happen accidentally too. This could have
Right.
been a complete innocent accident. Like, the developers don't have access to post on the forums in that one update section. That might just be someone that has a shared community account. And it sounds very stupid at its core. Like, someone at a company not having access to post to the forums, but I don't have access to post on my forums. I have no reason to. We have a
Right.
community manager for that. We have
I mean,
someone that
there's always like the chance that things could just have worked out that way, right? And there was nothing incorrect
I
happening.
also think that there's cases where it doesn't, and there is malicious intent, and then it looks bad on everyone. I think that when you're working a day job, you aren't paid to care enough whether you cause that problem or not,
I mean,
as
you know
long
how
as
you
you're
make
still
sure that you never
executing.
cause the problem? You don't have your devs be in competitive guilds.
Yep, you could tell your devs, if you want to play, if your identity is discovered, you have to delete your characters
Or just be
on
in a casual guild.
or be in
Be
a
in a guild
casual
that
guild.
is not top 10.
I had my player character at work actually discovered, and I deleted my character, and then I copied the character, I renamed the character, moved it to a different account, changed all the stats and all the cosmetic appearance stuff I had on it, and then I kept playing. You know why?
Right.
Because that would make sense. And then I made sure that I never spoke a word in the game again. That's how you fix that problem.
Right.
You can
I mean,
band-aid it by making sure that you just sweep it under the rug, but there's different ways that different companies handle these things.
when you
And
look at
I
live
think it's
EQ, when you look at live EQ, there's 36 rating guilds, right? Like current content cutting edge rating guilds. Why are two devs in the number one out of 36?
they probably joined because the other one was already playing there, if I'm going to
Yeah,
be
but
honest.
the guild wasn't number one when they joined.
It is now because they have the two devs in there. The players in
That's
there
what I'm
probably
saying. That's
didn't
what I'm
even
saying. Like
know.
that guild has to always, it will always be like, oh yeah, it's because they have the two devs, right?
Yeah, so
Even
you
if
could
the
just
devs aren't
dismiss
doing
them from
anything.
any sort of. If I was the players that were worried about the competitive rankings in these new expansions, I would automatically disqualify that guild on a community level. You might win first, but you will always be downplayed in the court of public opinion. Yes, the company will have a reason to protect itself, but I personally, as a developer, would just keep. I would just keep doing dev work. You can't let something like that just eat at you. You kind of fix it and then you move on from it. And
Right.
it doesn't sound like maybe they didn't fix it. Maybe they did. Maybe they just say, I don't, we've dropped the person that outed these people from the guild and we've continued on. Like this person shouldn't be harassing our staff and their actual identity or something like that. And there's different ways to handle that. And
Yeah.
sometimes they're tone deaf. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of developers aren't able to separate the two, but I also don't kind of blame them for this, even though if they are at blame, then shame on you. You shouldn't be doing that. But if they
Right.
aren't at blame, then and it's an honest mistake, and then honestly, a lot of the times in industry, this is an honest mistake. I will just say that they might have fucked up, and that's fine. I get frustrated because I know exactly how it feels to be in that position. And when you say people are like, "Oh, the devs are in this, and this guild," and something happens, I get frustrated because I know exactly what that feeling feels like to be called out like that, even if you did nothing wrong. For in my case, a person in the game had basically said, "You're a freaking developer. I already know that. Fuck off." And I said I immediately closed the game after that. I was kind of shaken up that they would spend the time to figure out what my character was because it was the same character I used as a player. And
Hmm.
in that sense, maybe I was stupid because I had posted on my social media accounts a picture of the video on my YouTube channel that also contained that player character. So I was like, oh, I probably did this to myself, or I might have talked about it on Facebook or Twitter or something like that. And then, oh, no wonder they put two and two together. I'm an idiot. So it could be something as innocent as that, or it could be something more sinister.
I mean,
Either
you had to deal
way,
with the same thing with Quarm, with people being like, "Oh, Secrets is in the Faceless Discord." Of course, they got the first Nagafin, right? That kind of stuff
okay,
came up a lot, and you were like, "Hey, I tried
yeah,
to join like every big guild Discord."
I did, and Mayhem didn't want me in there because their members would be hostile towards me. Actually, like they straight up said that's the reason we don't want you in there because we're going to talk shit about you, and we
Yeah, I
don't
mean,
want you
well,
in there.
when your guild leader's in the red grocer Discord, it's a different environment, I guess, that you foster, right?
I mean, I was in that Discord for a while, and I even participated in the discussion, and it was just there's different. Here's the thing about those kind of channels: they're welcome to do rule violations outside of my Discord, outside of my stream, and outside of the game. I don't care what they do outside of the platform. No developer should, unless
Right.
they're actively, violating the rules in our platform and discussing rule violation, doing rule violations on our platform on an external platform. There's no reason why I should even care. People do what they do in their spare time. I just avoid them. And I did try and join all the other guild discords on the launch. Intervention didn't care. I think Intervention's formed after. I didn't even think I got the chance to
Yeah.
ask anyone but the Cabbage Patch, Project Faceless, and Intervention when they formed, I think, and Mayhem. I mean, Mayhem and Project Faceless were the two I was interested in. Eventually, we just made a guild channel anyway, and that didn't really need it to be a thing anyway.
Yeah, that was
So
super. The guild channel was great. It's been very
it's like the
impactful. Which
P99 UN thing, but not for anything but guild leaders to talk to each other, not just
right,
random
so people
people
don't
who
need to
talk
like
about
project and
racist
shit.
stuff. Yeah, that's all the UN became on P99 was just a bunch of people from the forums. If you look at the P90 forums, they've cleaned it up a lot. They went to this Discord because they thought it was funny because EverQuest players are easily offended by any sort of content, so they would just go
Yeah.
there to offend them and make fun of them for still, completing in the line races and discussing this petition quest like it was something that they thought shouldn't be. It was a whole mess. That's what I'm getting at. Anyway, I think we should. We're kind of running out of time here.
Yeah, we'll wrap up here. I just want to say really quick, I dogged on Mayhem a little bit. I actually like Mayhem, and I think Glitter, the guild leader that took over a couple months ago, has been doing a great job with it. So if you're listening to this,
I
Glitter,
respect people that run guilds like that.
Yeah,
because it takes a lot to actually put a community of people together.
Yeah,
definitely. I wish they didn't have pushed the Rivervale Fudge Factory name at the start. That was um, I get the whole alliteration, but then you have guilds like Dark Men of Otis and all these other alliterations to either homophobia or racism. And it's just
it could get crazy.
You can get very crazy very quick. We stop that out very quickly just for that reason.
Yeah.
I would say that Mayhem is just one of those guilds where I'm glad they do it in their own Discord, because I actually really appreciate the players when they're actually playing EverQuest. They're some of the most tame and appreciative players that I've ever seen in the game. So
yeah, they're good people now. All right, Secrets, it's been wonderful having you on here. Thank you so much for carving out the time. I always love playing EverQuest with you, and I enjoy playing on your server. So it means a lot to have you on here. I know we planned to do this like 5 months ago. Sorry it took so long for me to get around to it.
You need to take care of yourself. You just got to take care of yourself. Please do that. Like in the future, if you need to take a break and you don't want to do these immediately, perfectly okay. You call me when you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thank you, man.
Appreciate that.
All right, folks, that is DramaQuest. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you in maybe a little bit less than a week. And if you want content early or bonus content, hit up that Patreon. Please support us.